If I could please ask that you all check your cell phones and make sure they're on vibrate or on silent. And with that said, we are going to start off with our legislative prayer.
Sure. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Father, we ask for your guidance and wisdom on the decisions that we will be making today. Father, thank you for the many blessings that you bestow on us daily. Father, we ask that you watch over our first responders, our military, and our country, Father. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
We will now have our pledges. Whoops, throwing pins everywhere, aren't we? Today we have Karis Sanchez, and she's going to lead us in prayer. She's a third grader, and she's homeschooled, and we know she's going to do a great job today. So let's turn around and put our hand over our heart, and let's do the pledge right here.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee. Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
We will now do our proclamations, and today we have one proclamation declaring October 22nd through 26th, 2018 as Red Ribbon Week. Do we have individuals here to come forward? Please. Substance use disorder is particularly damaging to children and contribute to the 3 leading causes of death for teens: accidents, homicides, and suicides. It is imperative that visible, unified prevention education efforts by the community be launched to eliminate the demand for drugs. It is the goal of Red Ribbon Week and of the Alcohol and Drug Abuse Council of the Concho Valley to involve families, schools, businesses, churches, law enforcement agencies, and service organizations in all aspects of this campaign, and to establish an atmosphere that supports awareness, education, and ongoing initiatives to prevent illegal drug use. The Red Ribbon Week campaign promotes family and individual responsibilities for living healthy, drug-free lifestyles without illegal drugs or the unlawful use of legal drugs, and many activities are planned during Red Ribbon Week in Tom Green County. Therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, Texas, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim October 22nd through 26, 2018 as Red Ribbon Week in San Angelo, Texas, and call upon all citizens to support and increase community awareness and prevention efforts in our community.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here, and I'd like to thank Mayor Gunter and the rest of the City Council members for having us here. My name is Lauren, and I'm a part of the prevention team at ADAC. So part of our job as prevention specialists is to go out into the community and educate youth and adults about the dangers of drug and alcohol use. And so Red Ribbon Week is probably our busiest season out of the year. And I remember Red Ribbon Week growing up as something where I got to wear pajamas to school and put my hair crazy and wear funny socks. But we go around and we educate communities on the importance of Red Ribbon Week and what it really means. And it's honoring the DEA agent, Kiki Camarena, and his life and dedication to instilling and creating a drug-free community. And so that's what we're going to be doing come October 22nd through the 26th. and we just want to invite you to be a part of that. We say prevention always starts at home and in the workplace. So we would just like to encourage you to educate yourself on Red Ribbon Week and join us in the efforts to creating a drug-free community. Thank you.
We will now open the meeting for public comment. Issues or items that are not on the agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, begin by stating their name, and limit remarks to less than 3 minutes. Council members may request that a discussed item be placed on a future agenda. The council takes public comment on all regular agenda items during the discussion of those items. We ask that all public comment be limited to 3 minutes. Thank you. Do we have any public comment today? Carl, please come forward.
Protocol to sign up, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this morning. Good morning. My name is Carl Detloff, Superintendent of Schools for San Angelo ISD. It's a privilege to be here this morning, and first I just want to acknowledge your spirit of service and your philanthropy that you have for our city. So it is deeply appreciated, and many times I think about the 15,000 wonderful souls that I certainly have responsibility over, and then I think, whoa, you guys do that for 100,000 almost. So I greatly appreciate the work you do for our city, and it's a great partnership, and that will continue. In 2.5 minutes or less, I wanted to provide you a quick update on our November bond referendum and proposal. I will, at the completion of my public comment, I will provide you a packet of information. In that, you certainly have cost analysis, economic impact, and letters of endorsement from both community and Shannon Hospital, as well as our Chamber of Commerce. So I'll provide you that packet in just a moment. But first, I really want to highlight the student, and that's our learners. In SAISD, we have a learner profile. Basically, our learner profile is how do we create communicators, collaborators, critical thinkers, and creators. We need students that not only will compete in West Texas, but in a global marketplace, and also compete against many of our competitors statewide. As you know, our athletic and academic teams travel to the Metroplex to conduct business and to compete, and we are competing more than just in our local region. Now, our schools, many of our schools are 40 to 90 years of age. A quick synopsis, in 2008, we conducted a bond for $117 million. That was based on a $330 million facilities assessment conducted by an outside firm. So we chopped off $117 million of that in 2008, and we touched 11 schools. Now we are looking at phase 2, which will touch the remaining schools. We have about 24 campuses. So now we're looking at phase 2, which will touch the remaining parts. We have value engineered. We have chiseled the bond after our 2 vote margin. We have chiseled the bond down through value engineering. We actually chiseled it down about $15 million. However, with the cost of inflation at 5 to 8% a year, we decided to move quickly and go back to the referendum as soon as possible. So that's one of the reasons that we decided not to wait, but to move quickly, because on a $150 million bond, you're looking at $12 million inflation increase with construction cost. So we did that quickly. We listened. The feedback we heard, we had an additional survey this summer. The feedback said SAISD and Carl, $148 million is a big number. Also, 14-cent tax rate increase, we don't like that. Second and thirdly, a $29 million gymnasium, we are uncomfortable with that. So we listened and we have separated the proposal to two propositions. Proposition A, which is $111 million, focuses on the instructional spaces that we so deeply need in our community, in our city. Proposition B is the extracurricular spaces. The significant item in Proposition B is the gymnasium at Central High School and multi-purpose center. The current gymnasium at Central High School was built in 1958. Currently, we have 3 schools that were built in the 21st century out of 24, and that's the 3 L's, Lincoln, Lamar, and Lakeview. All those facilities were built in the 21st century. Our other facilities are 40 to 90 years old. We must adapt to meet the needs of our learners. And quite frankly, our learning spaces need to look more like Starbucks than a factory model that they're based on, that many of us, when we went to school, you're sitting in rows and desks. Now we need classroom spaces that are conducive to collaboration. We need digital drops. We need tables that can move. We need video monitors that are movable and accessible. So the classroom space looks different. Doesn't mean we need a brand new facility. Much of the bond is just renovation of current facilities. The 11 campuses that we touched, Holloman would be a good example, Bradford would be a good example, and Santa Rita would be a good example of older facilities that we have renovated to meet the needs of the kids. As well as we all know, school safety is on our mind. 2 weeks after the last bond election, we had the school shooting in Texas. So we have an urgency to make sure that we have retrofitted as fast as we can with our current funds, but we have an urgency certainly to create those controlled entry vestibules, more perimeter fencing, and create visibility lines with the front entry point at our schools. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions, and I'm not sure if I made my 3 minutes or went over, but I'll hand the packet out also.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other public comment today?
Mayor, Council, Shane Kelton, Director of Operations. Just want to remind everybody of the 2 upcoming town hall meetings that we have this week to discuss the curbside recycling program tonight. 6 p.m. at Southside Baptist Church, and then on Thursday night at Lincoln Middle School at 6 p.m. as well. So just want to remind everybody to please come out and share your thoughts on the curbside recycling program.
Where's the
Shane,
one-
is it Southside or Southland?
Yeah.
Oh, Southland, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Thank you.
Good catch.
Good catch, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have further public comment?
Morning, Mayor and Council. Michael Dane, Assistant City Manager. Can I get Lisa Marley to make her way up to the front, please? Mayor and Council.
Did the Redskins win or something?
If she did, you're in trouble. Lisa recently announced her retirement, and that's a tremendous blow to our management team. I wanted you to be aware that we're going to have a little reception to honor her service and kind of fuss over her on Monday, October 15th from 3 to 5 in the East Mezzanine at City Hall. Come and go reception, come have some cake and punch. But I also wanted to, come on up, Lisa. I also wanted to take a minute. You know, sometimes the issues we deal with can be very difficult. Sometimes they're clear-cut, and it's a matter of moving through those issues with dignity. Lisa always brings her A game. She's a pro's pro. She's an active listener. She gives honest advice. Sometimes it's painful or difficult for her to deliver, and many times it's painful or difficult to hear. Those are all desirable qualities in an HR director, but they are especially desirable qualities in a teammate and organizational leader, and she has definitely been all of those things. So I wanted to take a minute to say thank you, Lisa, for all that you've done, and to invite you to come celebrate with us her service to the city of San Angelo.
Thank you.
Mayor, if
Thank
I
you,
may add
Lisa.
as well, Lisa's been an outstanding HR director. We love you, Lisa. We're going to miss you. We thank you for all you've done for this community, for our city. Again, we wish we could keep you here longer, but again, we do understand. So, again, thank you for all you've done.
I have two things. Number one, we don't have a proclamation, but this month, October, is Hispanic Heritage Month, so we want to remind everybody that there will be many organizations celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month in the month of October. Also, I wonder if someone is here from the city to talk about the recent virus at the animal shelter and closing of the dog park.
Mayor, I don't see anybody here, but we are experiencing in the community a major outbreak or increase in parvovirus. We were seeing it at the shelter and confirmed with local vets that they are seeing it also. They attribute it to the large amount of rain that we've had, that it's brought the dormant virus to life, is how it was expressed to me. And so we stopped intake both to protect the animals that we have in the shelter and to protect outside animals from from the virus which is in the shelter. It's going to run through a cycle. We're likely going to lose some animals, and the ones that are left are going to be adoptable, but we don't want to aggravate that condition by bringing animals in who are infected or to infect animals which are not infected by bringing them in. So we wanted to take action. The action was recommended by our vet, and so we immediately took that action. They tell me that the parvovirus exists on property and can be picked up in places where animals regularly go. And so that was the problem with the dog park. It could become an area where that is readily transmitted.
Do we have a time frame on when the dog park will be open again, or when adoptions will be received?
The animal shelter activity will be reassessed in 14 days from last Friday, and we will make a further determination then. I have not heard how long the dog park will be closed.
Follow suit with what the animal shelter recommends as far as once the virus, I'm sure they're taking advice from the vets in town as far as when that's a safe time to reopen.
Okay.
We are recommending that pet owners control their pets, try not to let them get out, and if they have concerns about their pet's health, to seek the advice of their vet.
Okay, thank you. Do we have further public comment? Please.
Good morning. Mason Matthews with San Angelo Firefighters Association. I just want to announce that our annual Fill the Boot campaign is going to start tomorrow morning. It's our 19th year doing it. We'll be at the 4 intersections that we have here in town. I'll announce those in a second. But we'll be there 7:30 a.m. through till 5:30 on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. 4 intersections are Abe and Harris, 29th and Bryant, Johnson and Knickerbocker, and Avenue and Sherwood Way. Just want to remind everyone, be careful as they're approaching those intersections, as we are kind of moving in and out of traffic. Should have some safety vests on, but everybody who's out there, most everybody is still on duty. So if they catch a run, they'll be shuffling through the intersection and get back on their unit to make their run. So we collect about $55,000 a year with MDA. Did right under that last year, but we hand count all those funds, and then every cent goes to the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and most of that money stays here in the Concho Valley. And that goes to fund research projects that MDA does, as well as send kids to a summer camp every year. So we love being a part of it, and just want to remind everybody it's starting tomorrow morning. So
what you're asking is everybody get their money ready.
Yes, yes.
We've announced the intersections. Don't be shocked. The people will be
Absolutely.
standing there.
Yes.
Get those dollars
and
out and ready to put in the bucket.
And we know we're in traffic. I understand. We're doing our best to get to you. If we miss you, we'll catch you. We'll be out there all 3 days. So if we miss you on Wednesday, come back Thursday. We encourage everybody, give all 3 days. Every bit helps. Whether it's folding money or change, we'll take it all. So it goes to a good cause, and we're really proud to be a part of it. So.
Thank you, Mason, and thank you all who participate in it. It's
Appreciate
a great effort. Any more public comment? Joe?
Sure, thank you. Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council, Mr. Valenzuela. I just wanted to give a quick comment on the city of Sonora. I'm sure, as all of you have heard in the news, has suffered a disaster. And so as we begin the cleanup in Sonora. Hopefully this week we will be really gaining some ground. We've had some red tape to deal with, obviously, so we should start a major cleanup effort very, very quickly. And I say that because I've had some questions on social media as well as in person at some, recently at the last town hall meeting about where that waste is going. And so I just wanted to inform council and staff that none of that waste will be coming to San Angelo. So we will be using other outlets that we have to where all that debris will not be coming to our landfill. So I just want to let you all know that in case you do get some questions like I have. Okay.
We want progress to continue. They've
you.
suffered dramatically here. Further public comment? With no further public comment, we will go into our consent agenda. I'm going to start with Tommy. Do you have anything you'd like to pull off a consent agenda?
No, ma'am.
Tom?
No, ma'am.
Harry?
Yes, item C and item E.
Lucy?
No, ma'am.
Lane?
No, ma'am.
Billy? No. We will be pulling item C and item E off of the consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve all other items on the consent agenda?
Second.
Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda approved with exception of item C and item E. We will now move into item C. Consider approving items related to a contract with Asset Works LLC, Fleet Management Software. 1, ratification of payment made between May 6, 2017 and August 30th, 2018 in amount of $60,480.46. And 2, continuation of GSA contract number GS35F3176 for fleet management software to Asset Works LLC, budgeted annually not to increase more than 5% over the previous contract year price. Mr. Kramer, you're on.
Morning, Council. Ryan Kramer, Fleet Manager, Fleet Services. May I answer your questions, Mr. Thomas?
Sure. No one was on the, no one, when we approved this in 2014, none of the people that are sitting up here today was on that council at that time. So briefly want to talk about what that asset management software does, and then also want to find out how we got to the spot where we're paying $60,000 basically that wasn't approved by contract originally. So.
Yes, sir. So AssetWorks is the company name of the software, and we use this software in our facility to do basically everything that we do, all the way from service requests where individuals input information about, I need this fixed on my car, work orders in the shop, we do fuel transactions, parts billing, we report on everything that we could imagine through this software, and we do all of our accounting as far as charges and et cetera goes. So this software is very robust for us. It does everything that our fleet needs it to do to be as efficient and equitable as possible. And so that's how we, that's really how we function in our division. Just a little background on how we got to the software in 2014. Council did originally approve this on consent in May of 2014. The contract was signed, and then we did amend it once because we had the vendor had left out a piece of our needed software in the original quote, and so we added that. All still came in less than the original council approval of $215,000. The first year costs were around $202,000. That was the complete implementation of the software. And then we amended the contract to add about an additional $10,000, so we were still under the $215,000 originally. We began implementing in late July 2014, worked on it all the way through August to September of 2015, so it was about a year-long process of building the software to our direct needs. We put that in production at that time. We added some different features, including a GPS functionality integration, fueling integration in May of 2017, which you might remember. We use, again, the software for all of our daily operations, both in our administrative staff in the office as well as our shop staff doing work orders. So the issue that we found recently, we found a discrepancy between the background memo that was originally sent to council May 6, 2014, and the current wording in the contract. And so when that discrepancy was found, we submitted it to legal for their advice on how to move forward. And basically that discrepancy says this. On the original memo, it says staff in the other information, so it's kind of down low in the ending part of the memo. It says staff recommends authorization to execute a GSA contract between the City of San Angelo and Asset Works LLC for an initial 3-year contract term. And so that discrepancy between the current contract, which does indicate that it is an initial 3-year contract term, but then goes on to say that the contract will continue to renew automatically unless terminated appropriately as per the contract terms. So that's where the confusion was mainly held, was when the information was put in the background memo. We used the language from the contract, but perhaps we didn't get the second phrasing. And so when that was reviewed recently, we said, wait, there might be an issue here. Submitted it to our city attorney's office for review, and they suggested that this was the corrective action to make up for that we spent that we shouldn't have without council approval.
I'm comfortable with this. Actually, I was sitting in the audience when we discussed this 4 years ago, and I came to the microphone and recommended that we do this because I used asset software, fleet asset software at Goodyear. So I appreciate the explanation. We want to make sure that we're transparent, so I wanted to get that out to the citizens. So move to approve as presented.
I have a few questions, Harry, first. Can you talk about the dollar savings that Asset Works has brought to the table?
Sure. What we can easily see without doing calculations, which I don't have in front of me at this time, but what we can easily see through Asset Works is compared to what we had before, and so that's the biggest difference. We were using a software that our city still uses for financing and accounting, and for the fleet side of it, it just didn't do what we needed it to do. For example, if I was asked to run a report on fuel economy for our vehicles, I couldn't do that. I could pull data and look at fuel consumption and do it outside of the software, but I couldn't do it at a moment's notice, any given information. So pick the topic, that's what we couldn't do to pull reporting to provide our divisions and those that asked the information we needed to properly maintain and repair our fleet. So that's the biggest realm of what we needed. Since then, we've also built into the software, most of the aspects that we do in our division, including our fuel transactions, which is highly important to keep track of and see where they go and monitor those fuel consumptions. But we also do the other integrations, including with our parts contractor and GPS. And so from the wide view, Mayor, and I can't answer your question directly on the cost savings at this time, but from the wide view, all of those aspects that we do have become so much more efficient and possible, where before they, in a lot of cases, weren't even possible. Now we can provide you and others with data as it relates to our fleet.
So perhaps we can have that on an agenda going forward so you can update us with all of that information.
Sure, absolutely.
And I would hope that going forward, a contract wouldn't have 3 revisions that were missed or not put in or not understood. That's a lot of changes in a contract for one purchase. So thank you. Any other questions from council? With that, Harry, would you like to make the motion?
Motion to approve is presented.
A second.
Second.
Do we have any public comment? With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor of approving items C 1 and 2, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Item E, consider approving tax increment reinvestment zone or tiers incentive funding for 2 private projects in the North Tiers area for the properties located at 1102 North Chadbourn and 2412 North Chadbourn, totaling $71,881.58. John?
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. As you know, the Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone has an incentive program that private property owners can apply for funding to improve their properties within the zone. In this latest round, we did not have enough funding available in the south area of the zone And so we did not solicit incentive projects for the south, but we did for the north. We received these two applications for incentives, which the Tiers Board recommended approval of. And so I'll briefly describe each of those. The first is 1102 North Chadbourn, the San Angelo Insurance. They're requesting about $52,000. We do require a 25% match, so their match would be about $17,000. The summary of the work is demolishing and removing an existing parking area, new slab, 3 new windows, new awning, some stonework, facade work on the front of the building. This is what it looks like today, San Angelo Insurance. And basically, they just want to clean up the front facade, do some improvements to the physical nature of the facade and new signage, and partly get right now, if you notice, they have a lot of different signage. This would clean it up and both improve the appearance, but also make the front facade look much nicer. The second project is the Skyway Motel at 2412 North Chadbourn. Their funding request was for $18,000. $6,250 was their match from that. Basically, it would be removing the existing concrete and asphalt and basically resurfacing the parking lot, and then adding some landscaping along with the sprinkler system for the landscaping. They pointed out that they have recently done quite a bit of internal work to the motel, and so now they're just looking to improve the exterior as well. And so this is what it looks like today. They would provide grass and some landscape bushes along that side of the building. And then here's what the front looks like today. They would resurface the parking lot and clean up the landscaping there as well.
Is there any other remodeling work being done on the outside of the building?
Not as part of this grant request. This is all parking lot and landscaping.
On that first project, what was the concrete work being done on it?
That's basically in this area here, in the parking, and then the front where the sidewalk is, resurfacing that.
At one point, there was a conversation that that Tiers would not approve concrete work / parking lot work unless there was landscaping done as well.
Well, the way the policy is worded is that we would not fund parking and paving work by itself. But if it's part of a larger remodeling project, then it is eligible. Oftentimes that has included in recent projects landscaping in a parking area, although that's not required. All that's required is that it be part of a larger improvement. And so in this case, given that the area is currently all hardscape anyway, this one there's really not much opportunity for landscaping, but again, they are improving the facade of the building itself.
Big pots with flowers always looks good. Makes a big difference.
Sure.
Any further questions from council?
I just wanted to say that it's going to be very nice to see that Skyway Motel being worked on, because it's been there forever. So it's going to be a good improvement.
All right, with that, do I have a motion to approve item E?
Move to approve as presented. Second.
Is there a public comment on item E? No public comment on item E. We'll take a vote. All in favor of passing item E, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. With that, we will move into our regular agenda. Item A, second reading and public hearing of ordinance revising Chapter 2, Article 2.07 of the San Angelo Code of Ordinances to standardize provisions related to city boards and commissions. Hi, how are you today, Brian?
Pretty good. How are y'all?
Thank you.
Good morning. So normally we would put the second reading on consent, but there were a couple of items that needed some attention, so we've done that. And I can either go through the slides or I can just explain it. They're pretty minor. whichever one you would prefer, but I'll start explaining it if you want to see the slides.
Why don't you
just
do
let
the
me-
slides?
Okay.
It helps.
All right, so most of this is all the exact same amendments to the boards. This is, why we're doing it. We're going to bring the park commission at a future meeting. Then we talked about, what the reasoning was to move them to unified terms and kind of unify the boards in general. We removed some of the boards from the ordinance that no longer are needed. Downtown Development Corp, Housing Authority, keep it, San Angelo beautiful. We were going to remove the the airport zoning board from the ordinance, but upon further investigation, there's a need to leave that on the books.
Ryan? Question on the ones that, and I'm sure you've said this before, I just don't remember, but on the slide before, removing the housing authority, why?
It's really an affiliated board. It's not a board of the city, and so our ordinance really, it doesn't make sense for it to be codified in our code of ordinances.
Because we don't actually have any impact or anything that.
Mayor appoints all the board members, but we don't have any oversight other than that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so there were some of the boards that we could not make changes to the term lengths, and so we've unified as many of them as we could, but there are state statutes that prohibit some of them being changed. And there again are the terms. Of course, we're trying to go from 3 2-year terms on most boards, and so if you have any questions on that slide, just let me know. I'll give you a few seconds to read it.
Brian, for the public and those that may be watching, remind everyone, for the folks that are currently serving on a board or commission, what will their new term of service look like under these changes?
So their current term will be their first term. Or yes, their current term will be their current term. Sorry, everything in their service, they are where they are, and this ordinance won't affect where they have been
They can serve two additional, not to exceed the term limits, but then they can serve two full additional.
Well, it just depends on where they are in the process.
Where they are right now. Okay.
Because if they're in their current second term,
Yeah,
they're
if
in their
they-
current second term,
okay.
so that
Yeah,
doesn't change which term they're in.
Okay.
We're trying to go by the spirit of it, that the council's desire is to have kind of new blood rotating through the board. So if they've been on there for a long time already, then that's already counting toward their service.
Okay, question, Brian. A real life example. Last year, I made an appointment to the Airport Advisory Board. So currently, that individual is on a 4-year term. So will that 4-year term change to 2-year term? This is the first term. So will it stay at 4 years? Because
Under the authority of this ordinance, you give us the ability to kind of make this work over time. So the appointments that are already there, they exist. Appointments that go forward will be 2 years.
all right, okay.
And just to clarify, the way that the ordinance is written right now, it says the first term of a member shall include the term held as of the date. So that would have everyone starting over as a first term. So if we want to change that.
Okay.
'Cause I think that's what we had said, was that it would be whatever term they're in would be their term. So if you're in your second term, you're in your second term. You don't get to go back and begin your first term.
Right. And so we just need to make that part of the motion when it's approved, if that's.
Okay, Brian, I guess I'm a little bit slow this morning. So my individual that's currently in a 4-year term, would that individual's first term be 4 years?
It would be 2 years.
2 years, all right. And then the individual would have an additional
Two more terms, so
two-
they'll get to
2-year
serve,
terms.
yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions about terms? Okay. We talked about the zoning board of adjustment, the need to have additional alternate members appointed by Mayor Pro Tem so that we can make sure we have quorum at those meetings, because it's they need to meet when it's time to meet. We talked about the qualifications to be on the tiers board to be in compliance with the state statute, that they're at least 18 years old and a resident of the county or adjacent county or own real property within the zone.
Go back on that, because why would you use adjacent county?
That's the state statute.
Okay, just repeat that.
Right. Yeah, we are just following the state statute as it's written. Do you have anything to add? Okay. Construction Board of Adjustment and Appeals, we're changing from 2 2-year terms to 3 2-year terms. That can be a little bit tongue-tied. Meetings can be canceled. The main change there is that the meetings can be canceled when there is no business. Currently, they have to meet even if there's no business, which is kind of odd. And it also relocates this where it's codified in the ordinances to be among the other boards because it was kind of off on its own on an island. Water Advisory Board, the meetings will be called as directed by council. I believe that's fitting with y'all's desire for that board as an advisory board. All boards must approve new bylaws within 6 months to make sure they're in line with this ordinance. And we're, as I was mentioning before, we're authorized to stagger terms where it's appropriate. Predominantly it's on Costa DC where they're all on the exact same term. So we're going to be bringing back in February some appointments to get that corrected. And that's it.
Do I have further questions for Brian? Then do I have a motion to approve this with the addition that current term, you don't go back to your original term of appointment, but you exist in your current term?
Move to approve as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there public comment? Yes.
Sorry, Mayor, just a quick question. Joe Spano, Vice Chair, Planning Commission. I don't know if I missed it on the slide, but I was wanting to know if there are any changes to the attendance level. So I do know that there are a few boards where sometimes attendance is a problem, and to me it tends to hold up the business of the customer, which is why we're here to serve, especially on the Planning Commission. So I wanted to know if any of those are being addressed, if any of those are changed, or if there's a possibility to have that type of discussion. Maybe not today, but if other changes are coming down the line, particularly on the attendance. I think that if you are going to make the commitment to be on a board, then you should be showing up to meetings timely and not holding up progress for some folks. And I think there might be a little appreciation in the community, especially on the building side and planning side, if we're not holding up any progress for folks not showing up to the meetings when they're supposed to be there. So I just want to know if that's going to be
He'll
addressed.
repeat, there is an attendance issue on there, and it
I
says
can answer
that.
that.
Okay.
That's a good question, and I think that is a desire of council as well. And so we talked about that in depth last time. 2/3 attendance is required. If you're not there for 2/3 of the meetings, then it's an automatic resignation.
That's on a rolling 12.
It's on a rolling 12 months as well. Yes.
Right.
Okay, any further public comment? With no further public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor of approving item B, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. We'll move on to item C. No, wait. Sorry, B. That was item A we just approved, to correct me.
Correct.
So we are moving to item B, which is the first public hearing and consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 11, Utilities, Article 11.02, Water and Sewer Systems, Section 11.02.031, Rates by amending the conservation discounts. Allison, you're on.
Morning, Mayor, Council.
morning.
Allison Strube, Director of Water Utilities. Sorry, clickers. Oh, here we go. So today for this item, we have the current conservation discount. What is on the slide in front of you is what it states in the ordinance. Currently, we issue a 10% discount to those customers that use 3,000 gallons or less. That 10% applies to the base rate plus their volumetric charge. And this has been in implementation since July of 2006. So what do those 2018 discounts look like? This is for a 5/8 inch standard residential customer. These are what their discounts look like at the 0, 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000 gallons. As you'll see, as you get closer to that 3,000 gallon mark, the discount you are receiving is more than if you were to use, say, 0 gallons or the 1,000 gallons. And I'm going to bring that up here in a minute, but that's one issue that I see with this conservation discount is that as you use more up to that 3,000 gallon threshold, you receive more in a discount. And so this is just an example to show that these customers that are receiving this discount are already receiving some of the lowest tiered rates for the residential class. So for the 1,000 gallon residential customer, they are charged $3.30 for that 1,000 gallons, and they receive a $3 discount through this program. And so effectively they are paying 30 cents for that 1,000 gallons.
Go back to that slide again.
Yes, ma'am.
Allison, a minute. So walk me through it again.
The customer, I did an example at the 1,000. If you use 1,000 gallons total for the month, you're paying $3.30 for that 1,000 gallons, that volumetric charge, but your entire discount that you're receiving is $3. So ultimately, you're paying 30 cents for that 1,000 gallons.
1,000 gallons of water.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
What does it cost us per gallon to treat water? What's our dollar figure per gallon of water?
I'm sorry, Mayor, I don't have that in front of me. I don't want to misquote a number. But I can get that for you.
Go on.
So, Alice, oh, I'm sorry. Go
ahead,
Ma'am.
Bill. No,
Okay.
Billy, go ahead. If everyone will please ask to be acknowledged before we speak, I would appreciate it.
Would you go back to the other slide?
Yes, ma'am, sorry.
So, this 6 to 15,000 gallons, right? People are paying $5.62
Cents a thousand per 1,000 gallons.
per 1,000 gallons. So what would be the discount for that person?
If they used over 3,000 gallons, they are not getting a discount. So the only
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, Lucy.
How many people does this affect in overall?
We pulled some numbers on average. Monthly average is about 9,000 customers, so 25% of our customer base receive this.
When we, in fact, put this into place, which I think you said was 2009?
2006.
2006. So when this was put into place, had we yet created the new tier that was approved, that we hired the consultants to do to help develop a water fund? So this was done in 2006. When was the new rates created?
2015.
2015.
And it adopted in January 1, 2016.
So when we did the study and created the new rates, we didn't go back and look at the 2006 situation we'd already created. So we did this, but we didn't change this to accommodate this.
Well, they had tiered rates prior to the residential classes had tiered rates for a while. And so it wasn't just it wasn't these new rates that the residential class is paying. But we didn't mess with the conservation program itself, just the rates. So, yes, ma'am, we did not go back and change the current conservation discount when we did the new rate plan.
So what would be the difference between the two in terms of what you would pay?
I don't understand,
So
sorry.
in 2006, we said you're going to pay $3.30 per 1,000 gallons of water.
Oh, I don't have what the 2006 tiered rates are, sorry. I don't know if we compared the discount of what it was in 2006 compared to what it is today. Sorry, I did not bring how that conservation discount has evolved. But I did bring that when council adopted that in 2006, reading back through the minutes of those council meetings, that they projected the total annual revenue or decrease to revenue for this program was going to be no more than $150,000. I think it stayed under $150,000 for 2 years following that, but ever since then, we have exceeded that $150,000 in terms of issuing these discounts. And so, for instance, in 2017, close to $380,000 went back in discounts.
Yes, Tommy,
Allison,
and then
you may be going to get to this question, so if you are, then I'll hold off. Are you going to talk to us about possibly expanding these discounts? This to me looks to be a pretty small focus, the residential folks, where we haven't.
Yes, sir. So one of my main goals is not just to get rid of this conservation discount and then not do anything in its replacement. I'd like to see a more robust conservation program. I think we target a very small section of our residential customers, and we don't target our commercial or industrial institutions, schools, college campuses. We don't offer any conservation programs to those. And I think it's also important to note that for a family of 3 or more, it is almost impossible to use 3,000 gallons or less. And those individuals and those families are doing means of conservation, but yet there's no program that they can apply for. So I do have a future slide that kind of shows all the, maybe not all is not the right word, but a host of conservation programs that we could look into and that we could also target other industries, commercial, even enhance our residential conservation program. But I do, it wasn't my intention just to take this away and not replace it with something in the future. But I do think that we can target some other areas and enhance our conservation efforts. Real quick, I'll get to that.
just 1 second. Harry had a question
Okay,
or comment.
yes, sir.
And you probably are going to get to this based on my conversation with you. I would like to see us really not do this, take away this conservation thing right now. I get citizens that use this 3,000 gallons or less that are concerned. They're on fixed income. I'd like to wait until we put this more robust conservation program completely in place and take this and roll it into that at the same time. So I think unless you can dispel some of whatever may be out there from these citizens, that I would like to wait on this portion of it until we make a more
Let's
robust.
see the whole presentation. Yeah, keep going, Allison.
Real quick to finish up this slide. While we do have some customers in this 3,000 gallon or less usage category that are truly conserving, I'm not going to deny that they are not conserving. There are still some of these credits being issued, particularly to realtors and to home builders, that basically it's because it's a vacant home. They have it on the market. They have services in their name so that, you know, when they go to show a home or as they're building a home. But it's just because the home is vacant. But these, it's a residential service, and they are receiving these credits as well. So there are not only people living in their homes that are conserving, but there are also other conservation discounts going to those that aren't truly in the act of conservation.
Mayor.
Yes, Billy.
Allison, on that slide that says conservation is not the reason that these credits are being awarded, is that what you just described to us? A vacant
Yes, ma'am.
home, for instance?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
So these are just as I said, a host of the different programs that we could look at in terms of implementing. These could adapt not only to residential customers, but also our commercial customers. I think it's important to note that some of our schools and those type of things are some of our largest users. And so when we ask them to conserve or they can apply for a program that saves a little bit, their small percentage is a much larger volume in the grand scheme of things. So we may get more bang for our buck in terms of commercial customer conservation programs and just enhancing our residential customers to be able to get the homes that have more people in them, 3 or 4 families, that we can ultimately make a bigger impact on who can receive and who can apply for conservation programs. So with that, I do have the recommendation for this ordinance to be removed, but we are open to keeping this one in place until another program is implemented or whatever the council's desire is. I don't have specific details on all these conservation programs, but we'll be happy to look at whatever ones y'all would like to see. And with that, I'll take any questions.
So if we're to go back, and I want to look at once again at how little one is paying for the water, which water is one of our most precious resources that we have. We can't have a great city if we don't have quantity of water. Water costs money to go find. Water costs money to bring into town. We got to have water. So talk about this slide again.
Yes, so in essence, this class is already receiving, or this user of 3,000 gallons or less is already receiving the lowest rates that we offer. And this, if I had the commercial class and all of those up on the screen, this still is the lowest per 1,000-gallon charge that we have in our rate structure. And so they are already incentivized basically with that lower rate, and they're being further discounted with this program.
So how many people do we have that use 1,000 gallons or 1,000 gallons or less?
The numbers we pulled, I think that let me go back to this. So there's 4 categories that can ultimately apply for the discount. They're pretty split evenly. I'm not going to say it's a 25% all the way down, but for rough numbers it is. So with the 25% of 9,000 customers, Michael's good at mental math.
So when you look at the 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000, the combination of those is the 9,000 people?
9,000 is the total for all 4.
Those 3?
Yeah, of all
or
4.
the 4?
Yes. So it'd be 25% of, roughly, would be in each of those categories.
And what are some of explain what we use the water fund for.
So a large percentage of it goes to the operation and maintenance of our system. Debt service is another very large portion of the water fund. We do have very large capital expenditures that we have to pay even before a customer pays this $3.30 for that first 1,000 gallons. We still have a tremendous, if not millions of dollars of expense that it costs just to get the water to the treatment facility itself, let alone treat it, the capital and pumping expenses to get it to the customer. So that is in essence why the base charge is charged to customers, because there's a lot of cost before we even deliver a drop of water to that customer. But ultimately, we pay for everything from old debt to future water supply sources and those type of things with the water fund.
All right, move forward on a couple of slides. All right, here. So when you go back and look at the minutes from the old meetings, the minutes indicated that we thought at that point in time that the maximum amount of dollars that we would be giving back to water customers would be $150,000.
Yes, ma'am.
And now we're up to $378,000.
Yes, and 2018 is just the January through July numbers.
So that's going to exceed 400,000 perhaps.
Yes, because we do see as this discount, obviously, as we go into the winter months, people aren't using their irrigation system or aren't doing outdoor watering. We do see more people get this conservation discount.
So we need to be concerned about what was anticipated as an expense versus what is the reality of that program. And the cost.
And I think for that cost of $400,000, you could look at doing, you could target different things. You could do several of these programs, one program. It just depends on what y'all's desire is for conservation programs and what, if you do want to do just residential class or commercial classes. But for $400,000, we could target several of these programs.
I know we can't be in the business of allowing fees of only 30 cents for 1,000 gallons of water. I know that number doesn't work financially.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor?
Yes, Billy?
May I ask?
Yes, please.
Allison, I think several questions, but could you go to the previous slide? In 2018, of that $227,000, is there any way to analyze how much of that went to people who only paid 30 cents per gallon, per 1,000 gallons of water? Is there any way to determine that?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have that number?
I don't have that number right in front of me, but I can look at that.
What I guess my concern is exactly what Harry said. If we eliminate, we just came off of a drought level, and we go into proposing that we eliminate the conservation credit, I think that sends an unclear message to our citizens. And so I would like to know if, people who are only paying 30 cents a gallon, if that equates to $400,000, or are there citizens who are actually working, to conserve in some level, or do you understand what I'm saying?
I guess you just want to know a
Is it
breakdown.
working? You want to know if the program's working based on, are they just naturally going to use 1,000 gallons, or are they conserving to only use 1,000? Is basically what you're asking.
Exactly. And I would kind of like to know that. The other thing is, you mentioned, I think your word was a more robust conservation plan. How long do we think that would take, and why couldn't we leave the current system the way it is, quickly work toward this more robust conservation plan instead of taking something away? Because I think, it's just the perception when you're giving me a conservation credit and then you want to take it away, that you're taking something away from me. And we sometimes, as citizens, as lay people, miss a bigger picture of the point that the mayor was making, that originally we thought we'd only be paying $150,000 a year, and now we're up to $400,000 a year. And, that's really not good math for us as a city that's trying to be financially conservative. But at the same time, I think we have to take into account the perceptions, the perspective that our citizens may have.
Mr. Witt, I'd like to answer one of those questions and kind of give you guys some statistics to help you understand some of the things that we're looking at. Lance Overstreet, Assistant Director, Water Utilities. The average person uses, when you're looking at the average and you're determining what your usage is and how much water you need, the average person uses 100 gallons a day. In a month's time, one person on average uses 3,000 gallons in a month. And so the way the current program is set up is it doesn't really provide for conservation, because it's saying if you're a single person and you're using the average amount, you're going to get the discount no matter what. What we also find is that even on someone who is being very conservative in their usage, and they can cut that down to 50% to where you're only using 1,500 gallons per month, that's still not under 1,000 gallon. What we're really seeing in some of this stuff and the statistics that we're finding is that the ones who are under those lower amounts may not really be conserving. It may just be from lack of usage. So say homes around the lake where someone comes in for a weekend and they use it for 1 weekend a month. They're getting the discount just because it's empty, there's no usage. We're also seeing where empty houses that may have a meter on it, they're getting the discounts because there is no usage.
Lance, if I could. Mayor, I was surprised to find that I received a discount. We were changing houses. We had sold a house and left the utilities on so the buyers could do what they thought they needed to do. We received a conservation credit 1 month. We didn't do any active conserving. We weren't doing anything special to reduce the amount of water we used. We simply left the account on so the buyers could do what they needed to do as they were moving in. And so we received that credit. That hit the nail right on the head for me. I was really hadn't thought about it in those terms, but we hadn't done any active conserving, and yet the city was giving us a credit for that month. And so there's a disconnect between the financial incentive and the behavioral changes that you're seeking.
And what we're seeing with this program for all the council is that, say you have a family of four. A family of four in a month, on average, uses 12,000 gallons. If you take a family and they get very proactive and they do, they have rain barrels, they go into water conservation with all of the units in their house, they go through a very large, robust system with maybe using gray water. Say they can get their usage down to 50 gallons. They can cut it in half, 50 gallons per person. They're at 6,000 gallons per month. They're not going to receive a credit. And so the problem that we're looking at in this whole program is that the program is not really functioning as it is designed to do, which is to promote conservation. Now, when we looked at this, we also considered the whole idea of, okay, what if we have somebody on a fixed income, or we have a low-income individual, and it's just by nature they're able to take advantage of this? Well, if that's the case, then we need to have a program that helps a low-income person, not necessarily a conservation program that's also. So really, we're talking about two different programs that may need to be looked at, not necessarily one that's not working, that just happens to be functioning in both capacities. And so from the water utility side, we're asking you guys to repeal this because we're looking at a couple of different programs, both of which need to be revamped and relooked at, so that way they actually function as they're intended. If we are looking at something for a reduced income or a fixed income, then we need to have a program that actually functions for that, and not just because of you have 1,000 gallons or 2,000 gallons or whatever the case is. And if we have a conservation program, we need to have one that actually promotes conservation globally on all levels, not necessarily just because the house is empty or just because it's one person who happens to be using the average daily use and they're getting a discount for not conserving.
It's an ill-conceived program from the beginning.
It is. And even the way the program is designed, it's designed because it's a straight 10% break. If you use 3,000 gallons, you get more back than if you used 1,000 gallons. So we have a program that's not functioning. And that is why we're asking you guys to consider repealing it, is so that we can actually get a conservation program that is functioning and working. And if you guys direct us to, and we need to look at a low-income credit, then we can get a program that actually functions and does that as well.
Lane, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, you answered part of it about the rate structure and the low-income aspect of it, because on that slide for the conservation items, I did not see anything that could be financially feasible for a low-income person. They're not going to go through and convert their house to gray water or get rainwater harvesting, because that can be expensive. Maybe the commodes and the flappers, that might be financially feasible, but on a $90 toilet for their, that's going to take about 3 years for them to pay off. So,
and parts of these programs would be to ultimately give a larger rebate, say a $50, $60, if not $90 rebate for that toilet replacement program. So we would still make sure that it is mindful of the dollars that individual is investing in conservation, and would hopefully be enough of a reward that it actually those customers want to go out and replace those old inefficient toilets with.
These are just some of the ideas. It's
Correct.
not the entire concept of all ideas that could be brought forward. These are just the initial ideas. So we as a council have a lot of opportunity and a lot of ability to add more into these conservation programs. I just see, when you go through the statistics and you go through the analysis of what that program did, it's ill-conceived. It's just
I'm in
ill-conceived.
agreement that we need to take a look at this, but I'm also in agreement at the time with Billy and Harry that we need to keep this on until we can come back and do a more structured system for this.
And we can do that. We can change the effective date that it doesn't go, the current conservation discount program doesn't go away until another conservation program is adopted by the city council.
Because I don't want to
for its replacement.
I don't want to get away from the discount of giving to the customers for conserving.
Right.
But I also need to ask a question, what y'all were talking about, the lake houses or the vacant homes. Is the base rate of $26.68, is the price to clean that water in that, or the volumetric charge? Is the volumetric charge of just your profit, what you're selling to the customer?
No.
Or is that, out of that is what the treatment level is?
So you're asking, does the base charge include treatment, or does
Or is it
the base
volumetric?
charge includes some level of treatment, because the plant, the water treatment plant itself is a very large capital expense. Delivering water to that facility, though, like I talked about earlier, getting water even without it going into the home itself, the utility has a vast expense in getting that water to the treatment facility, treating it. So some of those base charges do come with the treatment cost itself. The reason you also get some of these, as you go up in the tiered gallons and they get more expensive, is because we have to size pipelines for that peak demand, so irrigation use being one of those peak demands. So we have to oversize distribution systems for those individuals that use above average volumes of water during the month. And so the oversizing of mains and those type of things, and the capital cost invested with those is why some of these tiered rates are higher as you use more water.
I have this other question for the vacant homes and the second homes at the lake. In my opinion, and you have to run the numbers, you're not going to have them, but you're actually making more money because you're not delivering water to those facilities, and you're still paying the base rate of $26.68.
You are still delivering some amount of water to that facility. You're delivering it to that tap and to that meter.
Right.
Ready for its use.
But it's shared with the other clients on that street also. If it's not going through their meter, then
But you're
they're
still pushing that
paying.
volume of water into the distribution system.
Correct.
You know, Councilman, you raise a good point, is at what profitability exists at what volume levels. And I don't think that they've brought this forward with that philosophy in mind. They're just saying that there was really nobody there conserving, nobody avoiding the use of water. They simply weren't there, so there was no behavioral change.
That's why
but
I was
you raise
asking
a good
how
point.
much the profitability is.
That's a good point that I couldn't answer, is
yeah, I was about to say,
how
and that's something I
profitable
didn't bring.
are you at varying levels of usage?
But it goes back to the cost of producing water and delivering water. And that's a very important.
While we don't have the detail, I think the last time we talked about cost to treat water, we were closer to $2. We've never been anywhere near 30 cents. So we were talking about 30 cents for that first 1,000. When you ask that question, it's much more than 30 cents to treat 1,000 gallons of water.
Well, we certainly need to create a program that incentivizes conservation, and this program does not do that currently. It's a great program for just existence, and I think we have to be pretty aggressive about what we do. One, creating a conservation program that truly incentivizes conservation, number one. And number two, we have to deal with the realism of the need to drill more wells, a need for water treatment plant, a need, a huge amount of dollars needed to ensure we have water up to 2070. And so with that conversation, we need to conserve, but we also need to make sure we are charging the right dollar amount for conservation. We have great needs.
Lance Overstreet again. Mr. Carter, if I can kind of give you an idea of the base charge real quick. What we have to also realize is that regardless of whether we are supplying water at that particular time to that particular house, is that there is an infrastructure that has to be supported as well. And so when the water demand actually happens, there has to be an infrastructure in place. And so a lot of that base charge is not just supporting the function of the plants, but it's also prolonging the life of the infrastructure, the aging infrastructure, all of those other investments that have to happen in a capital environment, which is going to be a cost whether there is a usage or not. And so the reality of it is the plant has to actually function regardless of how much it is actually putting out. The pipeline has to be able to pull water into that plant. The distribution system has to be able to distribute it. And so the base charges are actually set oftentimes to help out with those capital costs and the maintenance of all that system. And so whether there is a usage or not, those things still have to be in place so that way when the usage does occur, it's functional.
Right, and that's what I was asking, because that's, you're still paying for that.
You're still paying for that,
Whether
exactly.
you use the water or not, that
Correct.
that is still being paid through the 2668.
Exactly.
So that doesn't go away. The infrastructure is still getting paid for.
And also with these other conservation discounts, these are long-term benefit. So once you replace that toilet no longer flushes 7 or 8 gallons anymore. It flushes the 1.7 or 2 gallons a flush. And so you see that savings from the implementation of that new installation, rainwater harvesting. These are long-term benefits and conservation mechanisms, whereas with the current program, you could conserve 1 month and then not conserve the next. You can bounce back and forth in terms of if you want to conserve and receive the discount or if you don't. And so you don't have that long-term benefit that some of these programs do, such as zero-scaping. And we know that a lot of San Angelo has implemented these conservation methods, and so maybe we can incentivize even more people to do so.
From what I think I understand, that council does not, council wants to add new ideas to the conservation programs, and perhaps continue with the existing one until we have some better numbers. But meanwhile, that time frame that we're talking about could be months down the road before we come back with some real numbers.
Correct.
And some
I
real
think
impact.
we'd want to bring a presentation back that would talk about residential, commercial, and what all the different options, all these options, plus whatever else y'all would like to direct us to do in more detail.
All right, just a minute. Harry has a comment or question.
It's kind of a follow-up. I think we need to get to this robust, increased conservation programs, but I'll have to make this comment. Some of those individuals that are on fixed income that depend on this conservation rebate that we're giving them today can't afford to put some of these things in place. They're going to have some help putting in a new toilet or clothes washer and do some of these other things that you're talking about. They can't just go out and do the gray water. So we're going to have to figure out as we talk about these conservation programs who these people are, and maybe take a look with Bob Salas and that particular group to see if there's a way that we can help them to this conservation. But I think we need to make sure that we don't take away something today that they depend on until we can get to this spot.
Harry, you had a comment?
Question for Teresa. Teresa, to move this item along, the way it's worded on our agenda here, how would we need to word the motion? Because I agree with what's been said up here. Let's leave this in place for now. Let's have staff come back to us with a much more comprehensive program. What's the best way to word that motion?
So do you want to go ahead and approve it on first reading but make it not effective until such time a new program's adopted, or do you want to just bring it back at a future meeting date?
I'll say personally, I'm okay to make it effective when another program comes back. If the majority of council says no, we don't want to do that, that's okay too. But let's leave this alone for now, and then have them bring it back. And if we need to just have it approved at that time, okay. Again, I'm not firm one way or the other on that.
Okay, I think Lucy has a comment, and so does Tom. So let's start with Lucy.
I just had a comment, Allison. When you said that you would be looking at 2 different programs, which is one is for reduced and fixed income people. So that's something that you're willing to look at?
I guess I have just up on the slide in front of me conservation programs, but if y'all are wanting to look at some sort of low income program, that I think could be a separate discussion, but also we would need to talk about the funding of that as well. But I think that what we're saying is that this program in place now is, in some of these cases, a mixture of both. It's a single person, low income, elderly living by themselves. They are not so much in the act of conservation, but by essence of their use getting this conservation discount. So I think we need to look at a conservation program itself particularly, but if the council would like us to look at a low income in removing this program, we can look at that as well.
Tom?
Allison, on the 0 gallons level, there's 2,300. If we say there's 2,300 among these 9,000, would those be houses that are just up for sale? Unrented, not being used?
They could be that, or they could be the user that hasn't used up to that 1,000 gallon mark.
It should be pretty much.
Yes.
So just my opinion, that level needs to go. I'm saying, as we move forward, that level here is probably not affect anybody here. I'm saying today, that level probably needs to disappear.
Do I have further comments? Lane, do you have a question?
One question on your statement. Did you say that toilets were flushing at, did you say 8? I don't.
You said
Standard
7 to 8.
I think it's like
about-
7 gallons.
Okay.
Older toilets prior to
They were
the
about
Energy
3.
Star. Okay.
Older toilets, I think, were about 3. The new ones were about 1.6.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have those exact
So
numbers in front of
50%
me, but they
reduction.
are considerably more in terms of what they are today.
Do we?
I'm thinking Lane's getting a bucket.
Yeah,
and going
Lane's
down
getting
there.
a bucket and taking it in there.
4 gallon savings per flush and dividing it into the 1,000 gallons usage, and that's 714 flushes.
Well, the reality is
I'm
this
cost
program is.
analysis on how much that toilet's costing versus the $3.30, and
What
how
we
long
know
that
is
pays
this
off.
is an ill-conceived program. It needs to be reevaluated, work needs to be done, and that work is going to be multi-tiered. At the same point in time, what we have to do, and I remind everybody, we got a lot of water needs and expenses going forward. A lot of water expensive needs going forward. So whatever program that we do, we need to make sure we understand the short and long-term impact to water and our ability to pay debt service. At the same point in time, not punishing people for conserving or not having this go forward. So it's multi-tiered, and I think this deserves a lot more conversation. I believe that there's a lot of work to be done here.
And we'll bring those back to you all.
If I could go
Yes.
back to Tommy's question, the way you would pose such a motion would be to motion to approve as presented with the effective date being at such time council adopts a new program.
I would make that as a motion, what the city attorney just
You want to
stated.
repeat that, Teresa?
You're going to approve on first reading as presented with the effective date being at such time the council approves a new water conservation program.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Public comment.
Council Steve Hampton. Well, I heard on the news last night that we're 3 inches over our average rainfall. FYI. We have a bill before us that's going to hurt people. I agree with Harry and Billy and Lane. This needs to be considered. This proposal in this statement is saying that it's in the budget, but we don't have to spend it. I think this is a wrong way. I think it ought to be just voted down and wait until the program's in place. You don't know how long it's going to take. Also, your water bill is also affecting your rainwater bill. I think they're connected at the waste.
What would be the rainwater bill?
The stormwater.
Stormwater, not rainwater. Okay, thank you. Please come forward.
Hi, I am Lynette Lucas, and I'm here just because I'm a taxpayer. And I think there should be a study on flushing toilets here. I've heard a lot on the other side of it that we need. Well, I think, for one thing, I'm going to say that we should not be incentivizing. We should be not have a program that tells people they have to do anything. That we can encourage for conservation, and I think people are really open to that. But I've also heard people say that if the toilets that flushed and had more water and the older, it worked the first time. the newer ones, they flush 3 or 4 times. So, I mean, there's probably got to be a study on that it probably uses the same amount or more water. But I just would please do not make a program that is going to put any burden on the taxpayers.
I think
want
we
you
ought
to
to move beyond the
consider
toilet conversation. I think there were many other options on there that were
Yes.
great consideration. I
Sorry for
think
that.
focusing on the toilet
That's
was
Lane-
really
yeah, that's Lane's fault.
limited in concept and
I've just heard that conversation more than any others for some reason. But yes, and the zero-scaping, I mean, I lived in Albuquerque previously. That was just a weird thing because you try to put the rocks, and then the rocks are a problem, and then weeds grow up in the rocks, and then that's a problem, and it's not really, some of these things are not wonderful solutions, but I think encouraging people more than making it a program that people are fined or you know, if they don't do it, or they get a certain amount of money if they do that, is not the best way to go about it.
thank you. Further public comment?
I think one of the things that...
Could you state your name,
Oh, I'm
please?
sorry, I'm Joe Hyde. I think one of the things that hadn't been discussed here before y'all go about basically raising water rates on people about $400,000 a year is that I just pulled up the budget for the water department, and in 2016, your actual was about $3.8 million in revenue, and the latest I have on the budget, Mike, was $4.2 million was estimated for FY18. So that's like a $500,000, $400,000, $500,000 increase.
That's not the whole water fund. You're looking at some piece of the water fund.
That's not, it says Water Utilities Administration. That's not the same thing. Anyway, that's what I would look at. I would look at how much more is the water department making, or the water enterprise fund making, and consider that, because there's a lot of, I guess, discontent about, the water rates and how much water bills actually are. That's all I have.
Could you move the microphone down a bit, Anna, so we can hear you? Thank you.
Some of us are short. Anna Bartosh, and I listened a few weeks ago when y'all were spending $2 million trying to cover stuff, but now we have another big need for water. I remember when this was instituted in 2006. I would like to know what the water rates were then and what they are now, because when this was instituted, the rates magically went straight up. So if we institute another program, are the water rates going to be increased again? I also agree with Lynette on those low water toilets. You do flush more than once, so the net result, I don't believe, is conservation. And the next thing I have is, how are you going to determine who's conserving? You want a program for those that conserve. How are you going to monitor that? I mean, we conserve, and we just got in the mail, we get a little rebate, but I don't know, how are you going to monitor conservation from house to house to house?
I think the comments are well made, Anna, and I don't know how we can do that. I don't know that it's, just as we didn't know it'd go up to $400,000 when we projected $150,000. So in my mind, I think that we certainly have a motion on the floor. We have a second on the floor. We've had public comment. Allison, do you have another comment before I make another comment?
No, I don't have any other comment, just available for any other questions.
I truly believe that there needs to, I think if we wait until we find a lot of other options and do an analysis on it, could be a year, it could be longer. And I think we need to make sure we understand what we're doing here. I do not in any way want to impact low-income families. They're an important part of this city. They're an important part of the decision-making in terms of policies that we have. But I also know that in long term, we've got about $120 million out there that we're going to need to find money for water. And so with the whole idea that, yes, water rates have gone up, and the idea with the water rates was to create some additional funding so we can have bonds, or we can pay for debt for the $120 million that's going to come up pretty soon. We can't have this conversation in a very narrow window. When we have this conversation about rates, conservation, discounts, we need to have the conversation about the future needs of water. Otherwise, Peter and Paul are not in the same room, and they need to be in the same room when we have this conversation. We've got a lot of water needs, and I know this, no city exists without great water supply. Daniel, did you have a comment?
Mary, I think you said it very well. We did implement, of course, our water rate fees, and that's to address, of course, replenishing a fund balance that had been completely depleted, to make sure that we have the money necessary to replace current infrastructure. And you nailed it, Mayor, is to address future projects as well. So I've heard a lot about you're building up a fund balance. Of course, we're building up a fund balance. So it's the responsible thing to do to make sure that we can pay for all our needs. And of course, one of our biggest needs is to address that future project. Mary, you mentioned having something up to 50 years. We need to get that addressed, and that's something that City Council is addressing at this point, but that money has to be there.
And I would say the following, that if we do nothing else, my recommendation is one thing. Look at the low-income families in this city and look at what their needs are relative to the pricing of water. With the exception of that, and that's an important, very important part, I'm not sure we should be moving forward on the current program. It was ill-conceived. It's not conserving water. But we want to take into consideration the low-income families, and we do not want to punish anybody and make them feel like they can't afford water. That would be irresponsible on our part. But I also don't want to wait a year to come up with the analysis on all those ideas. At the same point in time, we're trying to make some decisions about water needs and paying for our water needs. So with that, I'm not comfortable voting positively on the motion on the floor because I think it doesn't allow us an immediate plan of action. I think it's
do we need to amend it to include a date by which it needs to come back to us?
I think we need to review I think the motion could be that what we want to do in a very short window, 60 days, is come up with a game plan for low-income families.
But does that include the entire comprehensive options for?
I mean, getting the answers to all those comprehensive things and then weighing A and then B and then C, then D and E, and thinking we have a realistic approach to what those dollars are going to be, I think is unrealistic. I just think it's unrealistic. Look how wrong we were on this program. Really wrong on the numbers. So I want us to address an opportunity to look at low-income families and address those needs. With the exception of that, I think we need to be realistic about what we're doing here.
Again, I'm not hard over about this motion. I was trying to move us along here, so you know.
Well, I'm not interested in moving us along if we don't have a game plan going forward, because water, no city survives without water, and the funds to secure our future with water.
I think staff has probably got. I think they've got the message. I would assume y'all have gotten the message from the discussion.
I think so, Council, and I think from our standpoint, I think if we move forward with whatever motion you guys make, we just need to be very clear as to what direction we need to. If we need to look at two separate programs, do we have to have both programs come back before this changes? Do you need one before the other one? I think also, too, Allison mentioned the funding of this. If we run two separate programs, we have two different fundings that has not been considered into our current rate plans. And that's something that we're going to need some direction from council. Which one is the higher priority, the conservation or the low income? And if we bring back the low income, does that mean the conservation goes away until that plan becomes back? We just need some direction from you guys as to what your priority is in terms of those two programs, what timeline you guys would like to see. And then also, too, we're going to need to reevaluate our current rate structure for this next year if we are going to be implementing two programs separately within that same year as to how that impacts everything.
I think we have to be very cautious about how we're moving forward. And I remind everyone, it wasn't too long ago when we had to boil water for 2 days and everybody had to go out and buy water. What were you paying for a gallon of water then?
I'm at a loss here, folks. My brain is not engaged here with what we need to do. I'm thinking you all have the message pretty clearly that we are concerned with several things. With the conservation, I think that's, to me, that's clear. With making sure those that struggle to pay their bills are also considered. I think you also are hearing that we need to do this in a timely manner. So whatever we need to do to move this along, is what I'm willing to do. So if I'm willing to rescind my motion and start over.
Please.
So I'll rescind the motion, and somebody else that's got far better wordsmithing than me make the motion. I don't know how to make the motion.
Do we have to even have a motion?
We do need a motion to approve today for the first reading, and then it could be to postpone it until Allison's ready to bring back the study, just whatever you want to move forward with, but we do need a motion for this first reading.
Well, the motion I think that we want is we don't support this motion, and that we want to have further information and statistics brought forward before we consider any motion. And we need to start, I believe, this is a very long motion, isn't it? So sorry.
I think you could just
could
move to
just move to
postpone
postpone.
this.
Let's postpone it
There you go.
and come back with a lot more facts and information and statistics, because we can't afford to put a program into place that we project costs $150,000 and it's now $400,000. We have $120 million worth of water needs going forward for the future of San Angelo to take us to 2070 or beyond. So let's not make a short-sighted motion and take a vote when there's a lot more information necessary.
I thought that was what my motion was doing, but obviously
Said
not.
till we come up with a solution, so I think that covered both.
Well, we had a great discussion, and I thank everybody for your input, and I thank the citizens for coming forward with your input. There's a lot more consideration and information needed.
We're postponing at this point.
We're making a motion to postpone.
Yes.
So do we want to give a date certain by which the information comes back to us? 60 days, 90 days?
What kind of time frame,
I was about to say,
Allison?
we haven't gotten into the discussion of the low income side program. We've been more focused on the conservation program. So I do have more detail on those type of programs. So I would need some more time to research and do some analysis on the low income and get with Bob Solis and those type of groups to get their input. And so we will work on this as expeditiously as possible, but I don't have a time frame exactly. I could bring conservation programs back to you just to discuss those and kind of the cost of implementation of those type of programs pretty quickly.
60 days?
Within 60 days, I could bring
First
back
meeting in
information
December?
on the ones that I did have on the slide, and then always get input from y'all regarding other ones. But for the low-income one, I do need to do some more research on that one and see what kind of legwork is involved with that.
Tom, you had made a motion that, or made a comment about the 1,000 gallons and under.
Well, we're not going to move on it, so, but I mean, point of it is, under that level to me looks irrelevant to what we're talking about. Those people either have a home they're not using or something, and those typical people are not low income. I don't think the 2,300 people that affects are going to be people that, like Harry and I have voiced that. I'm just worried about the gap. You know, we have some people here that actually are very dependent upon this,
Right.
which surprises me. I'm just worried about the gap.
Yes.
So you've
Okay.
got my opinion on it.
All right.
Mayor?
Yes, Billy.
I just wonder if we couldn't make a motion to postpone this without putting a time limit on it, because I think Allison and Lance understand the need for us to move very quickly on this, but I don't want to add more pressure to them to say, give us something in 60 days. And I'm sure she and Lance are going to be working on this, and they may come back, before that. So I hate to put a limit. I would just like to make a motion that we postpone a vote on item B today.
Yeah, I think we just said that we weren't going to take a vote on it, and based off of their ability to put together information, they'll come back to us when they're ready with information.
Well, I thought, Julia
So-
said we had to have a motion.
Postpone it.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, so you make that motion.
I'm making that
Okay,
motion, yes.
And is there?
I'll second that.
Okay,
motion.
well, that was,
Second.
is there a third and a fourth, a
Okay.
fifth and a
Yes.
sixth, and the seventh says, okay, any more, okay, with that motion to postpone and a second, do we have further public comment?
Quick, I'm Lynette Lucas, and just a quick, I just wanted to know how you're going to define low income. What do you consider low income? That would be a huge question in this, and thank you all for your time.
Allison?
And those are the exact type of questions that I don't have the answer to, and that will revolve around doing a lot more research on that. And so that is something that we'll be looking at very closely.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure there's some statistics out there that that very well define what low income is, and particularly in this city. So there's a source for that
Bob saw us.
information.
Bob
Yeah,
saw us.
Bob, where are you, Bob? Thank you. All right, with that, we are going to move into the first reading and public hearing of
We need to vote, Mayor. We need to vote, Mayor.
Okay, well, we're going to take a vote now. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes 7-0. All right.
And Lane needs to work on his potty questions for the.
I
this
think we've
meeting.
had all of the toilet conversations we need today. Okay, item C, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance amending Chapter 4, Article 4.03 to amend sections 4.03.032 and 4.03.033, and Chapter 4, Article 4.04 to adopt the 2015 editions of the International Residential Code, International Plumbing Code, International Mechanical Code, International Fuel Gas Code, International Energy Conservation Code, International Existing Building Code, and the 2014 National Electric Code. You're on, Al.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, council members, Mr. Valenzuela. My name is Al Torres. I'm the construction manager for the city of San Angelo. But for the previous 9 years before that, I was the building official, which is why I'm bringing this forward. I do have our current building official, Charlie Kemp, here with me. She and her staff will be responsible for enforcing these. So if questions come up during the presentation, she may come up and help me answer these. So currently, as you probably know, we have these are the codes that we currently have adopted. A year and a half ago, we moved forward with the 2015 International Building Code, which is a commercial code, and the International Fire Code. The remainder of the codes, we're still under the 2009 codes. Those 2009 codes were adopted back in 2010, with the exception of the electric code, which is 2008. The electric code is always 1 year behind the other codes, or 1 year ahead, however you want to look at it. The way we look at these codes, the International Code Council is an international organization that puts out a model code. Basically, they look at the codes, and they have committees and look at lawsuits and look at have meetings all over the country, and they put out these model codes that they're just recommendations. Cities, municipalities, we have to look at those model codes and determine whether those codes are right for us or whether we need to make amendments here and there based on our local business practices. So that's what we've done. So we formed committees to discuss the significant changes. We had the 2009 code that we had adopted. Since then, we had the 2012 version of the model codes, and there were a lot of changes in that version. And then now we have the 2015. So we've had two sets of code changes that we had to look at. So this has been a lengthy process. So those committees, we sent those out to architects, engineers, real estate agents, contractors, the general public. We've had a lot of meetings over the last couple of years. We had presentations to the Development Task Force, which is the development committee or a development community. We meet every couple of months. And so basically, we took all of that input and information to put together this list that we've got now. And so essentially, we have two sets of amendments. The first section is amendments to Chapter 4.03, which is basically just housekeeping rules that are local to San Angelo. And the only two changes we're recommending there are adding plumbing contractors to occupations that are required to register. A couple of years ago, plumbing contractors, the state passed a law that said we could no longer charge plumbing contractors a fee to register. Somehow their name was deleted from the list of contractors that had to register, so we're just putting that back in. Plumbers are just like any other contractor. They have to register. They're just not required to pay a fee to do so. This year, the state passed another law essentially saying the same thing about electricians. Electricians are required to register, but they do not have to pay a fee. So we're adding them to the list of occupations that are excluded from paying a fee. And then the next section is the code section, which is chapter 4.04. That's what we're deleting in its entirety and replacing. So basically, I'm going to take these one at a time and just kind of briefly go through what the major changes are in each of these are, and then we'll go back and ask questions. So the International Residential Code, this is, of course, the code that regulates housing. So we adopted the 2015 residential code in its entirety, except for chapters 34 to 43. These are the electrical chapters, and we exempted those because we don't adopt the International Electrical Code. We adopt the National Electrical Code. So that there's no confusion, we exempt these electrical chapters because we have an electrical code that we adopt already. We also exempted appendices A, B, C, F, I, L, M, D, and P. These are appendices that really don't have anything to do with us here. They're the same appendices that were exempted in the last code, so we just continue that. We exempted N1101.14, requiring mandatory certificates of completion of projects. That has to do with the energy code, and I'll get a little bit more into that here in a little bit. Chapter 11 of the International Residential Code is the energy code for residential construction. In the 2015 IRC, there were, in your background information, there were 210 total significant changes from 2009 to 2015. Some of those changes, because it went from the 9 to the 12 and then to the 15, some of those changes reflect changes in the same category. In some cases, they went up and then they went back down. But there were 210 total significant changes. Of those, 60 of them were just clarifications, definitions, or clarifying a little closer what something meant. 47 actually relaxed the requirements, and 103 were additional requirements. Now, let me clarify that by saying an additional requirement didn't necessarily mean it's more stringent. It was just something that's new in the code that wasn't in there before. Most of those, I would say, were more stringent or more restrictive, but a lot of those were not. They were just something that was not in there before. So the actual changes and amendments that we've made, there's a chart at the very beginning. There's basic design values, the snow load here for San Angelo, the frost depth, all those kinds of numbers. Those were all unchanged. So we have to fill in the blanks every time we adopt this, but those were unchanged. The fence height exemption, this is something that we are amending. The residential code right now requires a permit for fences 7 feet or above 7 feet. However, our local zoning ordinance allows fences up to 8 feet. So it seems kind of silly to us to require a permit for that 1 foot difference. So basically, we're just increasing that to 8 feet so it matches what our local zoning regulations are. So what that means is you don't have to get a permit to build a fence until you hit 8 feet instead of 7 feet. The foundation anchorage, we left that unchanged. We've been building things here for many, many years under the current regulations. So we didn't see a need to change it like the 2015 code was requiring or recommending. Here's one of the big ones. Chapter 11, like I said, is the residential portion of the energy code. And the energy code is where we had a lot of resistance from the beginning. Initially, that's why this took us so long to review and get to where we are now. So the energy code, there is an International Energy Conservation Code book. However, and that book is divided into the residential portion and the commercial portion. The state of Texas mandated last year that all cities in Texas adopt the 2015 International Energy Conservation Code.
International or national?
International. The Energy Conservation Code, but only the commercial provisions of it. They also adopted statewide Chapter 11 of the International Residential Code, which is the residential chapter in the residential code on energy. So we decided to do the same thing. We didn't adopt the residential section of the energy code. We're adopting Chapter 11 of the residential code and the commercial provisions of the energy code. That's a little confusing, but we did that to stay in line with the state. Now, the state also mandated that if you are in a non-attainment county, basically there's a list of, I don't remember, 150 counties where you have to adopt the energy code and Chapter 11 as is without any amendments, any modifications. We are not in one of those non-attainment counties, so we are allowed to make amendments. So that's where our process went through, and we met with the building communities and all these meetings, and we kind of made some amendments and compromised what the building code was recommending, or what the energy code was recommending, and what we have now. Did you have a question, Amir?
I have a lot, but
Okay.
you can continue. I have
All right.
pages of questions, but go ahead.
Sure. So our first major amendment to the energy code, or Chapter 11 residential code, is we relaxed the minimum insulation values. As an example, in walls, currently the 2009 energy code requires an R13 insulation in your walls. The 2015 Chapter 11 requires either an R19 in your walls or an R15 plus a continuous insulation of R5. So we kind of compromised and went back to either an R15 overall or an R13 plus a continuous insulation of R1. That means you can still do insulation just like you are now, but then you would have to add an R1, which is just a minimum continuous insulation board along the outside. A lot of our builders are already doing that now, so it's really not that big of a jump. But overall, as you'll see, our thoughts were that we need to at least make some increases, because more and more the state's going to start mandating these bigger increases, and rather than having to make a big jump some point in the future, we want to at least start making small jumps now. So in each of these categories for these insulation values, we took what we have now, we took what the 15 is requiring, and we kind of met halfway in between. So that's what we did on that. Ceiling value in ceilings with no attics, basically the ceiling insulation is jumped to an R30, but if you have a vaulted ceiling with no attic, typically if you have a 2x6 rafters, you can't fit an R30 insulation inside that space. So we put an exemption in there allowing those to be R19, but we could put a cap on that of 500 square feet. If your room is bigger than 500 square feet, your rafters are going to be more than 2x6s anyway, so you can get more insulation in there. These next two are also the two big items that we went back and forth quite a bit, and this is what the committee, again, these are what these committees recommended. And a lot of these, my personal feelings, because my personal feeling was that we adopt the codes as they are. I mean, for the most part, there's areas where I agree that we should have made changes, but things like this is what the committee decided, and that's what I'm bringing forward. So blower tests, basically the 2015 energy codes require that on houses now, you basically seal up the house and put a machine up to the house and blow air into it. And if you have a minuscule amount of leakage, you fail. This is something that's very, very difficult to do. It can be done, but it raises the cost of the house tremendously. So basically, we haven't been doing this in the past. The 2009 version, which we have now, in fact, the 2009 version we have now already requires a blower test, but it also has an option to do visual inspections. So basically, we left the language as it is now in 2009, where we can do the visual inspections. And basically, that leaves it up to the inspector to walk around and just make sure that cracks are caulked and and everything is sealed as best they can, but we're not requiring the blower test here in San Angelo. Duct test, very similar, only it's for the HVAC mechanical system. The ducts, they're sealed. You have to make sure that that there's no zero leakage whatsoever. These are very hard to pass because a lot of times the equipment itself has leaks in it, and there's nothing the contractor can do about that. So basically, we're keeping the language the way it is now, and we're allowing for visual inspection. We figure if the contractor's doing the best they can, we make sure that all the joints are sealed and ducted, and everything's caulked and gasketed, and that's kind of the best that we can do. Water level monitoring devices, that's something that a lot of the plumbers were asking for. It just basically, it's the overflow system in your pans. So external devices are not allowed by code, but they're popular here, so we went ahead and allowed them to be used. So I don't know if you want to take changes on the residential code on each one as we go, or do you want me to just go through the whole thing? And
Well, maybe we should stop and do one thing at a time. I think two questions I have. Number one, based off of the things we've presented, how much does that add to the cost of a home?
I don't have dollar numbers.
Yes,
but it is something we looked at. TAB, and I know Kristen is here from the Home Builders Association, and I think some of the members from the Home Builders Association. TAB puts out reports on increased values of homes based on what the codes require. And the IRC in particular, Kristen, do any of you remember that number by any chance?
But they have to be able to afford to be able to buy the house to start with, right?
I think the IRC, and again, it's very dependent on what level house you're building and what exactly you're requiring. But off the top of my head, I think the number I saw was an additional $5,000 based on IRC requirements, not the energy code requirements, but IRC requirements.
But $5,000 puts some people out of the ability to buy a home. You know, it might maybe sound, it's just $5,000, but $5,000 makes a difference between whether you can afford to buy it and the bank will loan you the money or not. And my great concern is, if you look at it, we have 39 pages of changes. It's a lot. It's 247 additions, 123 clarifications, and 85 relaxations. That's a lot of paper, a lot of change, and I want to know the impact on the cost of a home and what happens if you remodel a home. What level are you going to be required to bring it up to? And we need affordable housing in the city of San Angelo. It's the #1 request, affordable housing. And I want to make sure that we're not putting out there things that are not required by law to do, but feels good to do, and changes and increases the cost of a home. And I have a citizen who would like to come forward and make a comment.
Sure. My name's Tanner Colster. I'm a plumbing contractor owner, Colster Plumbing. One thing I would like to point out on this, and I've got other stuff along this whole code thing. In the ductwork, it specifies in here for visual inspections instead of a blower test or other test. I'm not a ductwork, I'm not an AC guy, I'm a plumber. But we're here for visual inspections. I can look at his gray vest, I can look at his black vest and tell you from here, oh, they're the same brand. Visual. I don't know if they're the same brand. Visual does not mean that it's sealed and it's put in correctly.
Thank you.
Visual is nothing but visual. Something else is your cost of these homes going up. I do agree, they are going up a lot. We go up every 6 months on stuff. But San Angelo is behind 5 to 7 years behind every other city in Texas. When are we going to catch up? This little step here, we're not catching up. You know, y'all earlier in this whole thing are talking about the school district building a new school, want to catch up, want to catch up to play with the big schools. You have to catch up everywhere, not just one place. It's everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess my response to that is our inspectors are trained on what they're looking for. So when they look at his gray suit and his dark suit, they're not going to stand here and tell you what brand they are. They're going to ask the question, let me see the paperwork on your suit so I can see what brand it is and make sure it meets the standards that we're looking for. They know what they're looking for. So their visual inspections are to make sure that it's sealed the way it's supposed to be, that it's caulked the way it's supposed to be. It's not tested with a machine, but I mean, it's the way we've been doing it for a long time. And again, that's one of those things that's going to raise the cost of the house, is having to hire somebody, because you'd have to do this third party, have to hire a company to come in and do these tests and then fail. So then they have to come in and do some more work to it. Not to mention that the practice or the way that they build these to make these pass these tests adds to the cost of the house. So let me say something real quick on that item right there, the cost of the house. The building codes are designed to promote or to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. But part of that welfare, one of the building codes at the beginning do say that we have to take affordability into account. So if it's an item, when we look at these changes, and again, most of these changes, there's a lot of paperwork there, Mayor, but a lot of that stuff is stuff that's been in the code for a long time. They just decided, well, maybe we should have done this instead of that. If it's something that has to do with the safety of the building, then that's where I held a line or said, no, I think we need to do this. But the energy...
We haven't said that our buildings were unsafe before this conversation, right? Because we passed specific issues that dealt with those issues along the way. So we're not saying today, if you built it yesterday, it's unsafe, just because today I have new regulations on it. And we know that the bureaucracy of government tends to make building more complicated, more difficult, and more expensive.
Right.
And what I want to make sure we're not doing today is creating expense that is not required, homes that are unaffordable when not required to implement these things. Because even though it says safe, safe was a different definition last year and the year before and the year before and the decade before. We just get more heavily regulated, more rules, more regulations. 39 pages, and yeah, maybe, but 247 are new additions. That's a lot of change.
Yes, ma'am.
It might not be necessary and might be very expensive.
And we do our best, or we've done our best over the past, I don't know, however long we've had a building department here, to make sure houses are safe. And some of these make some areas safer. Things happen somewhere that you realize, well, maybe this could be done better. But you can only make things safe up to a point. I agree with that. And there are some, and we've talked about that in these committees. And there are some things you're going to see in some of these other areas that we thought were overboard, and like you said, it's a change that, yes, it would make safe, but there's only so many things you can do. We talked a lot in the committees about speed limit laws. If you really wanted to make everything safe, the speed limit everywhere would be 10 miles an hour.
You can't regulate to the lowest level.
Exactly. So we...
Now, to clarify on the dollar amount you talked about, that the International Residential Code, you quoted the 5,000. Was that based on all of the changes they were recommending?
Yes,
Okay,
and that's
not
why I said...
based on our recommendations, which are less than what they were recommending.
That is correct.
So that is based on if you did everything they said to do. So we can't give you exactly what ours are, but ours, as you can see, are much relaxed from what they were doing. Did your committee as a whole recommend this portion as being acceptable?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Like I said, we've had a lot of meetings with the Home Builders Association and a lot of other groups. And I think we're to the point where everybody's accepting of the changes that we're proposing. And a lot of these changes that we're proposing are to relax and lower those requirements to what the standards are today, because we're they were kind of on, they were kind of on the
those, yeah.
same.
There were 85 relaxations.
Well,
or
those relaxations are what in fact, those numbers that you're quoting and those 36 pages that 39 pages that you're
39.
looking at, those are if everything in the building code was as it's proposed, as the 2015 model codes are proposed. So they themselves relaxed some of that number of items. They themselves added that number of items. That's not the number of amendments that we've made locally. Those 39 pages are what the International Code Council has put forth.
How many of these are things that we've decided we want to implement but are not required?
There was, I think I've probably made just off the top, made about 30 amendments. I didn't count them, but we've amended about 30 of those items. I don't think we increased anything. All of those were compromises or
Well,
lowered.
I guess what she's asking is what are we required to implement? Are you required to implement anything, or can you leave the code exactly like it is?
Yes, as a municipality, home rule municipality, we can adopt whatever codes we want.
We have the codes for, safety purposes and all those kind of things, so we try to keep them modern as you have materials that change and technology and all those things. So a lot of those, you have new materials, and so you need to change to adapt to those things. But you get to choose. So if there are things, and that's why we put the committee together, is because we really want it to be what San Angelo wants. But you can leave it exactly like it is. It's probably not a good idea, but.
Okay.
Yes. If I could just add to that real quick. If you chose to, we could leave everything under 2009 codes. The 2015 Energy Code and the Chapter 11 Energy Code, I guess I'd have to go back and visit with Teresa about that because the state has mandated those be adopted.
No, I'm
But-
asking which ones were not mandated and
Okay,
don't have
right.
to change.
None-
That's what
none
I'm
of- none of-
interested
None
in.
of the others
Yeah.
we're mandated to change.
I understand mandates.
Okay.
But I want to know where our flexibility exists.
Energy is the only one he's saying that was mandated, portions of it.
Okay.
Rocky.
You want to come?
Morning, Council, Mayor. I want to thank Al. We've been working on this actually about 3 years, and also our new building official, Charlie. And all these amendments, and I don't speak for the home builders, but a lot of us have worked on this. All amendments in here we're for. This is lessening the code. These 39 pages may be a lot, but if we adopt the code as is, the numbers we're showing are, according to the 2015 meeting with the builders in Abilene, which adopted the 2015 code as is, we're looking at about $8 a square foot per home. If you adopt the 2015
It's
code
additional.
as is.
Okay, that,
Addition,
clarify that
Rocky?
$8 per square foot additional cost.
Yes, ma'am.
If you do it like the International Residential Code wants you to do.
Exactly. If you were
And
to
what-
adopt it as is.
And what the builders are supporting is what dollar per square foot?
Our estimates are about $3. And we know that we are way behind, and we need to do something now. So, because then we're gonna have 18, which is already out, and then we're gonna have 20, which is already out. And so we look at this as kind of going halfway. Let's get some of this stuff implemented. We do believe in visual. We're all professionals. And so I think somebody can professionally look at something and tell whether it is, works or not. As examples, I personally did 2 blower door tests on 2 of my houses 2 years ago to see where I was personally. I want to know how my houses were. Both of them passed. And so I don't think that's a requirement. That's just letting somebody else come in, create a business, and create bureaucracy and red tape and charge us to do a blower door test or a duct test to see that it passed. When we can visually look at it and pretty much know that it does pass. The bottom line is the homeowner. If that homeowner moves into a home and their electric bill is astronomical for some reason, there's a problem. So then that problem would be corrected. And so there are going to be accidents, and the blower door tests say something else and it not be correct. It's just technology. And so, but as far as the amendments, we want to thank Al and Charlie. I can't speak for the home builders, but I am for all of them. And it's like I said, it's just a halfway step for us to get closer to 2020.
Thank you. Christine Oliver, are you here? Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Kristen Oliver with the Home Builders Association, and where we are never in favor of regulation because that usually always translates to higher cost, we just want to thank Al and the city. They have been tremendous in working with us. We have had countless hours, countless meetings. They have gone through line by all of these codes, and I tell you what, if nothing will put you to sleep like these codes. I mean, these books are
It
huge.
did, I assure you.
Yes. Anyway, on behalf of the home builders, we are in favor of what they are doing. Like Rocky was saying, had we implemented these changes to the 2015, the costs are just astronomical. And so really this is actually a savings. This is a win-win, I believe, for not only the home builders but also for home buyers. And again, we just want to really compliment Al and his team and just their willingness to work with us, to listen, and just to work with reason in what these new codes are going to be. And so we completely and 100% support Al.
Thank you. Candy, do you have any comments? I'll continue.
Okay, that was the IRC, the 2015 International Energy Conservation Code. Like I said, we're only adopting the commercial provisions of the IECC. Chapter 11 comes out of the IRC, outlines the residential construction. So in the Energy Conservation Code, there were, again, 127 total changes, and this is from the model codes before we made any amendments. 25 clarifications, 14 relaxing requirements, 88 added requirements. We only, in meeting with the engineers and commercial contractors, there aren't that many here, but basically everybody's kind of on board with and they see these as necessary changes on the commercial side. Some of the things that I thought we'd see resistance on were the documents that they have to, and the testing that has to be done at the end, but they were all pretty much for that. They asked me to leave those in there because they all felt like they want to see that the systems are working so that there aren't problems a year from now, because of the warranty issues. So really the only two things I was asked to remove, if we sit here long enough, the lights will go out. I'm sure you all have seen that. Those lighting controls are required, and there's a list of places where those are required, and one of the places is a private office. Well, the committee didn't feel like private offices, you don't really need that in your own office. I mean, if you want to go in there and take a nap, you don't care if the light goes off. So we removed that from the list. And then there's another section that now requires skylights. Skylights are not mandatory if your space is over a certain size. That adds daylight to your system and reduces the amount of lighting, but skylights have their own set of problems.
Like a lot of leaks.
Right, so we didn't want that to be something that they had to do, so we took that section out. So those are the only two amendments that we made to the commercial provisions. The International Plumbing Code, again, same numbers I got from those documents, 95 total changes, 28 clarifications, 37 relaxed, and 30 new requirements. This first item, I know Tanner came up a minute ago and he's here specifically to address this, so it's got its own slide here. There's actually two sections of the plumbing code, one that requires what we call a water test, and basically what that does is at the top out stage, you go in and you plug all your sewage pipes, you pressurize it, fill it full of water, and the water has to go up 10 column feet or up a pipe 10 feet to show that there are no leaks in the system. This is important primarily for water too, but even for methane gas. We don't want methane gas leaking into the house, so it's important that we do this water step. Another section requires purple primer. I'm sure any of y'all have done any plumbing at home. The way you connect PVC pipes is you prime it first, and then make a purple primer, and then make a clear primer. So most people use the purple primer. You prime it, and that prepares the pipe for the cement, and then you put the cement on, connect them, and that creates a weld. some contractors don't like purple primer because it makes a mess. So what we've done is on the purple primer part, we have exempted purple primer because the code says you have to use purple primer, period. So what we're saying is if you have the trim out stages, which is where you have a chance of spilling the primer, you're doing plumbing underneath your cabinet, spilling it on your cabinet or on stained floors, we allow clear primer at those levels. But on the rough in stage and the top out stage, we want that purple primer. Primarily on this water test in particular, a lot of the builders came forward and said they didn't like the idea of having to do the water test. So our inspectors, we talked about it, and our inspectors are comfortable with the idea that if they can see that purple primer has been used, then they're fairly comfortable with the idea that the whole process has been followed. They did the primer, they did the cement, and it's probably a good joint. It's not a guarantee that it's not going to leak, but chances are pretty good that it was done correctly. So they are willing to not require the water test if they can see that the joints are all being taken care of. If we allow clear cement to be used, then you can't tell if it's been primed or not unless you look at it up close, which means they'd have to get ladders and look at each joint individually. So what we did was we kind of compromised. The code right now requires that you do both, the water test and the purple primer. So what we're saying is if you use the purple primer, you don't have to do the water test. And this is at the top out stage. If you want to use clear primer, then you have to do the water test. So we compromise one or the other. And I know, like I said, Tanner in particular, and I think there may be others that feel like he does, but he's the one that came to me and said he wanted to come forward and speak against this particular item. So, Tanner, I don't know.
Again, Tanner Colster Plumbing. This is the main reason I'm here today. I've been doing plumbing for 16 years. Had my own business in everything's been in San Angelo. I've been in business for myself for right at 8 years. Been doing new construction homes for right at 7.5 years. I think the word purple needs to be taken out of this completely. I am completely against purple primer. It's a visual, is all it is. The city inspectors, they go health, safety, and welfare is what they're after. I'm with them on that 100%. That's what my job is, my license, and everything else. Being purple doesn't mean that pipe is sealed. We do service, we do new construction, we do everything. I had been back to every type of pipe that there is, every type of glue that there is, where they've come apart because they weren't done correctly. Just because of color doesn't mean a difference. The code reads that the pipe has to be purple, or the primer has to be purple. The code also reads that the glue cannot be purple. Doesn't mean that the glue can't be blue, gray. So at the same time of this, if I prime my pipe with purple primer and I glue it with gray glue and you don't see the purple primer, are they going to fail my inspection? Because they can't visually inspect that there's purple primer under it. I don't care to use gray glue. I run many trucks. Purple primer has a lot of things other than the health, safety, and welfare. It stains trucks, it stains concrete floors, it stains everything it touches. Last week I went to a meeting with them. That morning I dipped my entire hand in purple primer. Dipped my other hand in clear primer. My hand was purple for 4 days. I dipped a rag back and forth. Clothes, uniforms. I mean, just everything it touches, it stains. Yes, when they're building a house, the builder can cover the floor. I'm not sure what can hold purple primer back 100%. If you get a can of purple primer that spills from 10 feet above, it's going to soak through before you can get it cleaned up. That's all there is to it. Some builders don't build homes that are stained floors. I understand that. But when they sell that home, homeowner moves in, 3 years later, the carpet's getting a little dingy in the bedroom, and they want to rip it out and put stained floors in, which they do a lot. They rip the carpet back, which isn't quite bad, but they want stained floors. They rip it back, and there's a big old purple spot on the floor that will show up when it's stained. There's another issue. My biggest problem with this is they've got it in the code now that if you don't use purple primer during top out stage, which is in the rough framing stage of a house, you have to water test it. Up until this, I've used clear glue, clear primer. We haven't had to water test top outs. We do water test underground. I do not use purple primer underground. Water test will show it. This is saying I have to use purple primer underground on rough ends. At the whole thing of not using purple primer, you can water test, you go back to water conservation. That's wasting a lot of water. When it comes down to it, the city of San Angelo comes in there and inspects that it's all correct. As a visual thing, it's all put together. Whether it's purple or clear doesn't mean that it's holding. That part doesn't matter. Only way to do it is whether it's water tested, 100%. 8 months from whenever that is, if it starts leaking methane gas, the plumbing contractor that put it in is reliable to fix it, not the city of San Angelo. So on that point, it's still my reliability whether I use purple or clear. I believe purple needs to be taken out of the code, the wording purple, period, because it's causing a bunch of issues. If they want to keep water testing in there on top outs, that's fine. We can water test. It is going to increase cost on houses, and it's going to use a bunch of extra water. We have not had to do it up to this date. I've done, I don't know how many homes since in the last 8 years. I can't say that we don't make mistakes, because we do, but that's part of, I mean, you go back and fix them.
Good morning.
I do believe purple needs to be taken out of it, and if the water test, if they want to require it, then we can go forward with water testing on all of it.
Thanks, Tanner.
But, their visual inspection, it's a visual thing.
Thank you very much for your comments. Al, how much water do we use when we water test?
Council,
Morning.
Charlie Kemp, the building official. In talking to the plumbing inspectors, depending on the size of the house, you're looking at approximately 150 gallons, like on a two bath residence.
And so this water test required at top out inspection uses 150 gallons. Is there another option here?
Well, the other option that we had talked about, that's why when we met with the committee, that was one, we talked about the primer, the purple primer, because you could see it from the ground and it would be a visual. Another alternative that we came up with is a smoke test, and kind of trying to give as many options and still meet the intent of the code.
So this proposal does not eliminate the waste of 150 gallons.
Correct. They could either use like the purple primer or do a smoke test. Yes. Those three options. Water, either you could do the water test, smoke test, or the purple primer.
What are you proposing?
Those three. Like
they're all three here?
Yes, ma'am. Because in the other, there's a section of the code that indicates that you can do a smoke test.
I'd certainly hate to use 150 gallons of water.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Al? Oh, Rocky, would you like to come forward? We all know you, but maybe everybody on TV doesn't know you, so go ahead and give it up.
Rocky Templin. We looked at this as a compromise with the water test. We like that on the rough end. All the pipes are in the ground. It says 10 feet. We actually put a pipe, it's kind of another compromise, to about 5 feet. So the plumbing inspector can walk up and see the water in that pipe. And that is that's in the slab. It's before it's pre-poured in the ground. We like to do that. That is a visual. They can see the water. On the top out, the problem with that is we have to go 10 foot above the highest joint. So that means on a top out, we're going to have to extend a pipe probably around 12 feet off the slab. So the plumbing inspector is going to have a ladder, and he's going to have to climb up on that ladder and look in the top of that pipe. So we looked at that as one, we're wasting water, and two, my experience with inspectors on ladders and attics is not good. We've had several problems, and so we didn't like that idea either. So we looked at this as a compromise on a top out that we could use purple primer. I don't like purple primer, but I agree with it. I'm willing to go with this. And then on the final, when we have finished products in the house, we can use clear primer, and so that we're not staining cabinets and floors and tubs and whatnot. Thank you.
This is probably a dumb question, but I'm asking it anyway. Is there another color besides purple that would be less damaging?
Not that I know of.
No, they only make the purple and the clear.
Go ahead. Was there a comment? Somebody wanted to add a comment? I heard voices in the audience.
Inspectors could use the same ladder to inspect the plumbing as they do the top of the duct system when it's sealed.
Okay, so I'm gonna I guess move on from that item. Like I said, everybody seemed to be generally on board with most of the stuff we've proposed. I knew this particular one we had some opposition, so it has its own slide here. Still on the plumbing code, we left the drinking fountain exemption in there. If you remember, we changed this a couple of years ago. Drinking fountains are required on pretty much every occupancy, but they're not popular. If you have a small business office, so if you're required to have one drinking fountain, then you can replace it with a bottled water cooler. And so that remained in there. Water and sewer piping is still required to be separated. This next one's another big one. The new codes reduced the distance that hot water can travel from 100 feet to 50 feet. What that means is if your water is traveling more than 50 feet, then you have to put in hot water circulation systems, which again adds to the cost of the house. Or water heaters are going to have to be moved towards the center of the house, like they like they have to be in some places, and that has its own set of problems. That was pretty unpopular with everybody on the committee, so we left it the way it is currently, which is at 100 feet. Moving on to the electric code, there were some things that were added that had to be ground fault circuit interrupted in addition to what's already on the list. We've never required them to be. These are the stuff that's under the counter in the kitchen. Everything in the kitchen is required to be GFCI protected. The stuff under the counter never has been, so we left it the way we've been doing it for a long time. Same thing with laundry areas. They've never been required before. Arc faults is another big one that, again, we talked about. Can you overprotect a house? So the new code, in fact, this is an exemption we made in 2009 as well. In 2006, arc faults were something that were fairly new, and they were only required in bedrooms. It's a different kind of protection than GFCI, but in 2009 and in the current codes, arc faults are now required in the entire house. But the way the committee looked at it, all of your wet areas, kitchens and bathrooms, are already GFCI protected. Your living areas, dens, if your lamp sparks and catches on fire, if you're in your living room, chances are you're awake watching TV or visiting or whatever, so you can respond. Really, the big danger is your bedrooms, because if you're asleep and your lamp sparks and catches on fire and you're asleep, then your reaction time is slower. So we thought bedrooms still made sense, but requiring it in the rest of the house didn't. So we changed that language to how it used to be in 2006, so that it's only required in the bedrooms. The new code increased how many outlets you have to have in a garage. And if somebody's building a big garage and they want to put multiple outlets, that's fine. But we didn't want to tell people you have to have 3 outlets when one is all they need. Underground electric lines, we want them marked with red tape. That's a safety feature. None of the electricians had an issue with that. And then weatherproof UL boxes are not required. Outdoor receptacles are required to be weatherproof, but these new boxes that they've started creating, they're bulky, they don't work very well, they break all the time, so we exempted those. And some electricians will probably still continue to do them just out of choice. The mechanical code, again, 69 total changes, 15 clarifications, 12 relaxed, and 42 additional requirements. We added the section on homeowners permits that existed in the plumbing and electrical. For some reason, it was missing in the mechanical code. It basically allows a homeowner to pull his own permit if he's homesteaded and he owns a house. This next change was pretty universal. Everybody seemed to think that we had this already, but we don't. If you have a bathroom vent on a residence, you are allowed to vent that bathroom into the attic, not your kitchen vents, but your bathroom vents. Right now, the code says you have to take it through the roof, but again, you have potential for leaks. It's more expensive, et cetera. Plenum's allowed in an attic without a duct. A plenum space is the space between your ceiling and your roof. And right now, you can use that space as return air back to your unit. But if it's a commercial building and you have firewalls and you have an opening where you've got air going from one plenum space to another plenum space to get back to the unit, then you have to put what we call a fire damper in that wall. So basically, there's a fire, that fire damper shuts down so you don't have smoke traveling through that wall. The new code increased the requirements, so not only do you have to have the fire damper, but now you have to have ducts that actually duct the return air all the way back to the unit. We didn't think that was necessary. It's adding cost to the project without any good reason. So when the current system works just fine, so we left it alone as it is now. And then the last change, one of our mechanical contractors who does a lot of the fireplaces here in town, there was a limit on angles that are allowed for chimneys on factory-built fireplaces. He said that's not an issue except for wood fireplaces, so we just added the word wood to that section. The International Existing Building Code, basically, which is where a lot of our current exemptions come from. You talked, Mayor, earlier about when people do remodels, do they have to bring things up to code? This allows them pretty much to, if it's existing, they're exempt from bringing a lot of stuff up to standards, unless, there's different levels, and the more you do, the more you have to bring things up to code. But for the most part, a lot of stuff you can kind of leave it as is if you're just replacing it or refixing it or minor
it's important
remodels.
because many people want to remodel their homes, but we can't expect them to go from the codes of 1940 up to the codes of 2015. Otherwise, they can't afford to remodel, and that's not okay.
This gives you a lot of those kinds of exemptions.
That was one of my questions pertaining to the insulation, because there's a lot of times I'll remodel a home and I'm not going to put an exterior, if I'm not doing anything to the exterior, an extra barrier to go from R13 to 15 plus.
Correct.
So you would still be able to tear sheetrock out, re-insulate the walls with the existing OSB on the outside.
We look at those on a case-by-case basis on the remodels, because sometimes it's kind of borderline. Are you above that percentage of where that threshold is, or are you not? But for the most part, you're probably correct. Now, the other thing I will say about the insulation value, one of your options is to do R15 in the wall without the continuous insulation. And the builders are telling me that there's foam products now that you can get an R15 in a 2x4 wall. So that's always an option as well, which is why we went with that number 15. So anyway, so this we're proposing to adopt without any exemptions. Nobody had any issues with that. And then same thing with the last one, the International Fuel Gas Code. nobody had any issues with it the way it was proposed. That is the end of my presentation, so I'll entertain any other questions and I'll answer
Well,
the best I can.
What I want to say is I want to compliment Al and your group of people, but also the home builders group, Rocky Templin, and everyone who spent the time and energy and effort to going through this, because if you take a look, again, and I say 247 additions, 123 clarifications, 85 relaxations, over 39 pages of paperwork, it's pretty overwhelming. And I don't want, at the end of the day, with all this change, to have a lot of unhappy people with what's going on. We need to learn to work together to come up with common solutions that benefit everybody and not try to force too much heavy regulation and costs onto the building of whether it's residential or commercial.
Yes, ma'am. And we went through our committee meetings with exactly that in mind. And I do also want to thank the entire home builders group and architects in town, engineers, everybody that helped me on these committees, electricians, plumbers, mechanical contractors. Yes.
Overregulation is not something we need.
Everybody chimed in, told me what and I told them some of the stuff that I recommended might not be what everybody wanted, but it's what most of us wanted. And Rocky in particular did a lot of research that, helped me out with in figuring some of this out. So I want to thank them as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, let me go back to my sheet and find out what we need to do here. So that was a first reading and public hearing of the should I repeat it again? The 247 additions, 123 clarifications, and 85 relaxations, and a whole stack of paper. Print paper, I guess we can recycle this. Okay. Maybe. That's today, not tomorrow. Don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Sorry, I may even made that comment.
You're dismissed. Oh, God.
Okay, with that.
I'd like to ask one question just
Okay,
for Tanner,
Lane.
just to clarify. Your preference is the clear, but you're saying if a plumber goes with a purple primer, they're exempt from either doing a water test or a gas test. Is that correct?
Okay, that's
now,
correct.
Now you're forced to be the one to have to go through a water or gas test, or smoke test, sorry.
As a group of plumbers and or home builders or whatever, I think you all have a lot of power, and there's a lot of groups on a national basis. Can't you get the purple color changed? If all of you demand purple to be different, can't we do that? You all have a lot of power. You have a lot of organizations. You have a lot of whatever. If purple's a problem, let's find another solution.
Clear.
But it's not so visual. What can be done in visual?
I mean, I'm just saying.
Lilac, maybe?
Chartreuse.
Use the fast setting blue.
do the-
It covers the
color so
purple.
we don't see it.
There you go.
We can see it, but don't mess
Do the
with it.
code as it is today. I mean, as of right now, we use clear. Or if you want to use purple, you do. But we do not water test top outs. Never have. I mean, I think that's the biggest problem here is the builders don't want the extra expensive water testing top outs. So their easiest thing on that is the plumbers use purple primer,
So right now, the water test is not required.
not on a top out. Not anything above a slab unless it's 2-story.
So really, the
If a
only
bathroom
change
above
is
stairs, then yes, it has to be tested.
so
But
it's either go through a water gas test, smoke test. Get that clarified. Water or smoke test, or use purple primer. So it's just a wording, but right now it's not.
it's a yes.
It's an option.
And
Option, it's not, it's, the water smoke test is gonna be an increased cost.
the purple primer, it'll be an increased cost because somebody's gonna have to cover the floor.
Have we seen a lot of failures? Is that what this is bringing
For a purple primer,
for purple or clear?
look at every plumbing truck that's white. I mean, they're leaks wise, I don't think it's whether it's purple or clear. I mean,
Unless
if you're gonna have a
someone's
leak, you're
going
gonna
in
have a
there.
leak.
Right.
They just, the inspectors in the meeting that we had last week were talking that purple, you can see that you primer it better, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a better solvent weld on the pipe. The two primers are the exact same
Tanner, how are they going to test your job? I mean, if you go through and do a house, something like that, how do they test it?
Right now they don't. They
Okay.
haven't ever. On the top out. Underground we water test. Underground we water test, and it don't matter what you use then. I mean, as this code reads, you have to use purple primer.
Gallons of water.
Whether you still have to water test underground no matter what, but you still have to use purple primer. That's part of that thing they're making us use purple primer underground. I don't believe in that. I mean, the primer has nothing to do with our job.
Same solvent.
It's making the same weld here with purple and purple with clear glue is the same as making it with clear and clear over here. And they do make different colors of glue. Just different kinds. But my whole company, I've always based my deal off of we carry clear and clear, and that's it. We do not use purple primer.
So every plumber has that option.
Correct. Everybody, and it's you can bring 10 plumbers in here, and I bet you get 10 different
Opinions.
Yes.
So keeping it.
Most 90% of them will be against purple primer though, because of the mess that it makes. And it does the job, it has no difference.
So
But that's where I was at, taking the word purple out of the code. And as for the water test, we don't do it now. We hadn't in the last 8 years that I've been doing new construction for myself, the last 16 years as a plumber.
So we're not, repeat the idea of the water test and the 150 gallons. So we're not doing that at this point with anybody? So,
Currently, no.
But it says that, go back to that slide, Al, because I think it basically says that we do it by the nature that it still exists.
Well, Tanner is correct. We have, up to today, we have not been enforcing the water test at the top out. And the purple primer, in 2009, we actually exempted the word purple. And basically, we had the same argument then. A lot of plumbers don't like the purple because it gets on the cabinets, it gets on the tubs, it gets on the stained floors. So in 2009, we actually we took the word purple out. The code requires purple. It says, and it's not any better than the clear primer. He's right again on that. They do the same job. The only difference is that you can definitely see the purple from a distance. When I do plumbing, you can definitely see because it gets all over everything. But the purple is just something, it's a visual thing. It's something that allows the plumber to look at it quickly and say, yes, it's got the primer, it's got the primer. Is it a guarantee that it's not going to leak? No. It just kind of helps him be more assured that it was probably the steps were taken to do it correctly. That at least there is a primer there. So, the cement should be there. Now, by all rights, they could have put the primer on and not put cement. You can go in there and just take it apart. They're not going to go checking to that extent. We can only do so much. But at least that helps us in that step. Same thing with the water test. Again, Tanner's correct. The liability ultimately comes back to him. 6 months later, if their customer's smelling methane gas and there's a leak somewhere in the system, it's going to be him that they call to come back and fix it. And he's got to find the leak and get it repaired. We don't want customers to have to get to that point, so we try to do our best to make sure the leaks are gone. That's the purpose of our inspection. But we have not been doing that up to this point. So again, if as a council you decide that's how you want us to go, you don't want us to have to do the purple primer or them to have to do the purple primer or do the water test, that's what we'll do. Ultimately, it goes back to him. But we're just trying to kind of take that extra step to help protect the customer from getting to that point.
So it's an option, it's not a requirement?
We are making it an option. The code says it's a requirement.
I know, so my point is the way it's been presented today gives you the option.
Yes, ma'am.
So any plumber can do it the way they want to do it, right? They don't have to use the purple primer.
Correct, and I do want to say, I know Tanner said, I know Tanner said that he'd just as soon see it go to whatever the code says as is. The problem with that is that the code says you have to use purple primer on everything. No exceptions on the finished work, no exceptions anywhere. You have to use purple primer, period. And I think that's basically what he doesn't want to do is use a purple primer.
All right, but I thought you just said the code says you have options. It's
No,
not
ma'am.
required.
No, ma'am,
That's why I
that's
was
what we're
asking.
proposing. The code says you have to use purple primer, and the code says you have to do a water test.
You're saying you don't have to do a water test and you don't have to use purple primer.
That's how we're proposing it.
And that's what's written,
One-
which
we're
supports
proposing
what-
that you do one or the other.
But that's what you're, that supports what you're saying.
Well, no, he's saying we have to do one or the other. Water test or use purple primer.
Or smoke.
Or smoke test. Another thing is, and Rocky can vouch for this one, I'm sure. 99.9% of the times, if there's a leak 6 months later on a vent system, it's not a glued fitting that's leaking. It's usually something, a nail or something after sheetrock has hit the pipe and broke the pipe in a wall. And you find that with the smoke test later on, not a water test, not when the house is done. That's it, or a sewer camera. That kind of stuff you're not going to prevent with the water test or purple primer now anyway. Because once we leave the top out, it's in framing stage. They come in there and they blow insulation and sheetrock it and cover it with cabinets. That's when all your stuff happens to the pipe. I'm not saying you can't have a missed fitting that's not glued or something, because it is possible. We're all human. Mistakes are made. But, yes. But no, the code, how it's getting read now is you either use purple and you don't have to water test, which my problem with that is that's just visual.
You've seen failures
no-
in purple primer.
Just because it's purple doesn't mean that it's glued any better than clear. Water test, it's a waste of water.
Agreed.
And a whole lot of extra steps.
Al, that just means you'll have to climb the ladder to inspect if we go with clear. Is that correct? That's what I'm hearing at this
They
point.
don't do that now.
But they'll have to, though. I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
What he's suggesting is, though, that we would take it out totally. You wouldn't require the test at all.
So you're, okay, Tanner, so
I
you're,
mean, best case scenario, keep it as it is as of right now.
and repeat
Take
what
the
that
word
is.
Purple out,
Mhm.
and you don't have to water test the top out.
Is that, yes,
And that's
Billy?
how the code is.
Yes. Billy,
I
go
just
ahead.
have a question, and this is strictly a layperson's
That's-
question.
Yes.
This is strictly a layperson's question. We're doing this test to see if there's a leak and possibly a methane gas leak, right? So is that how is that safety issue addressed? Because if I go to bed early at 6 o'clock and I don't awake until 6 o'clock the next morning and methane gas is
Well, you
leaking
don't
all
wake
night
at all.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So why would we eliminate the test or not do the test to check for the methane gas?
I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying we haven't been doing it. It hasn't been enforced the last 8 years that I've been doing new construction. I know that's another cost on builders that's gonna see. That's one thing that they don't want is cost. If we're looking at cost, let's not do it. My pocketbook says let's do it. It's more money in my pocket, more work. It guarantees at the end of the day I don't have a leak. So 6 months later, whenever I get a call that there's methane gas in a house, I can go to the builder and say, hey, look, it was tested before you sheetrocked. Now they have a leak. Somebody hit something. There's no questions about whose fault it is later on. I'm all for the test. I'm just saying if you want to look at cost and stuff for the builders, that's one of them that I would do away with. Hadn't been doing it any time in the last 8 years, so that part's not a big deal on me. My deal is the whole word purple. It was taken out of the code in 2009 or 2010 when it was adopted. I don't think it needs to be put back in the code. The water test is rarely, it's all up to y'all, but the water test it's one of those things it's either or. It don't bother me. It's gonna cost builders more, but ensures guarantee that there's no vent leaks at that point.
All right, so I'll go back to the way it currently reads so we can read it and understand it. Do you have the slide, please?
So this is essentially a summary. The actual ordinance language I didn't put on here, but it's in your background packet. But basically,
Let me ask the question. Water testing is not required as of today. The
water testing is in the plumbing code as of today. It's been in the plumbing code for a long time. It has not been enforced up to today.
And there have been no problems.
And, well, I mean, there's occasional problems, but like Tanner said, if a problem comes up, they typically will call the plumbing contractor or the builder. They go back after the fact and fix it. This step basically would just kind of help us prevent those problems ahead of time.
So we could eliminate that
piece.
piece.
If we eliminate the water test and the purple primer, which is how we're doing today, if we eliminate both of those, we will be how we're doing things today. I know you mentioned the methane gas. We're not really talking about the amounts of methane gas. It's really a safety issue. You know, if you have the leak, you're going to smell it. You're going to call somebody as soon as you start smelling it, and they can come fix it. So chances that it's going to build up enough to cause some kind of a issue are very slim.
Yeah, but if you're out of town, Al, or on vacation, and the methane gas is building up in your house, potential explosion.
Again, I don't think we're talking about those levels of methane
Really?
gas. Yeah, not like in a factory or something where you have larger amounts. But I can certainly research that and make sure that that's not an issue before our second reading.
Okay, so
if we take out the water test and the purple primer as I guess Charlie is the one that's going to have to force this, but we've talked about it. We can live with that if that's the way you want to go. We're just trying to, again, put that step in there, give them an option from what the building code requires. Give them an option so that they don't have to use the purple primer, but they can do the smoke test or the water test. Or they can do the water test.
They could do either or.
Yeah, either or. But if you tell us you don't think they have to do either, that's what we're doing today.
And we haven't had problems with what we're doing today.
Not that I can point to.
So why are we changing something that hasn't been a problem?
Because again, we know that there are problems out there. I just can't tell you how many problems there were.
Never create a
how many
regulation that
leaks.
prevents
Yes.
100% of anything.
Exactly. You can't stop somebody on something that might happen. I realize that. But this is a step that we can, again, it's all visual, like you said, that we can visually look at a pipe and say, okay, we think it's done correctly. There shouldn't be any leaks there. I mean, that's the whole purpose of everything that we do. Because otherwise, everything ultimately comes back to the builder or the plumber or the electrician or the HVAC
I certainly don't
contractor.
believe in wasting 150 gallons of water on this test. It doesn't sound like conservation, is it?
No.
The conversation.
It's a trade-off, again. I mean, you have to do one or the other.
I'll remind us what did the committee have this much discussion on this specific item?
No, this is really something that came up just a few weeks ago. Some of the builders actually asked for a special meeting, so we got together again, and they were asking specifically about the water test, and they saw that going through the language, they saw that it's in there. They were aware that we have not been doing it up to now, but pointed it out to us and said, are you going to start requiring this at this stage? So at that point, since we're aware of it, the question's been asked, we said, well, it's the requirement. We really should be testing for it, and decided to do that. However, we also realized the problem that, that causes, the purple primer causes. He called and mentioned that, because as soon as I found that out, I started sending the word out to everybody that this is something we're looking at. So that's how we came back to that compromise.
So Teresa, what kind of liability does the city have, since it's in the code, and if we chose to exempt the purple primer and the water test, and there is, heaven forbid, some tragic accident, what kind of liability does the city have since it's in the code?
Typically, in those cases, we only have liability in cases where we knew that there was going to be harm and we did nothing to prevent it. In a case where something might go wrong, so we're putting these stages or these steps in place to prevent any possible harm. As a general rule, cities don't have liability for those. Those are considered discretionary types of decisions.
Okay. So with that, there's a lot of information, a lot of details, and so if we have a motion, we can have a motion with some exceptions to it before it moves forward to second reading, or we can accept it as presented today with no changes. So I need to hear from council where your mindset is.
I'll entertain a motion to accept it with the exception of the water test / purple primer.
Is there a second?
Can we add to that motion?
You have to change it.
You have to change the motion. You can.
Well, my only concern is what Teresa brought up here, and it has been pointed out with this. There is no test on that. I mean, it's not if I'd have a plumber, I'd have Tanner. All right, so that's not a question. Every plumber I get, will they have the quality you have? I don't know that. So I certainly see the point of, you know what, if I go by and I see purple, I know they at least use primer. If they didn't use it, well, then I'm not for sure. I don't want to drag this horse out, but I think is there a point that we can say from this point forward on the motion, you know, in the building codes or when they get a permit, we document the plumbing has not been tested. I mean, these houses have not had did not use purple primer and did not have a water test on them. Can we document that and state that up front? And if somebody buys that with that, that's fine with me.
Yeah, you could absolutely indicate that that's the standard which we're using so that people are aware.
And then if a builder wanted to add that, they could. I don't know how we'd phrase that, Lane. Or
Well,
if that's
Lane can
even possible.
rephrase it to say,
With
to add the
requirements
language
of-
which you just added to it.
I will do that. I will move to accept the International Building Code as presented with the exceptions of the vent water test / purple primer and adding to that proper documentation to state if the test was done or not. That we do not require the test.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right. With that, do we have public comment?
Steve Hampton. I'd like to compliment Al and his presentation. I think this is one of the finest presentations I've ever heard in codes. Usually it's rubber stamped and pushed on through like we heard that maybe Abilene did. I think that's poor politics, poor business. Also, we've heard of changes that are not going in because we choose not to do it, and I like that approach. Also, these things, we've talked an inordinate amount of time about purple dye, these little things like that can be changed on peer review and reevaluation. And we pass these laws through. The books come out, they stack up to be way high, and nobody can possibly catch everything. But if we had a review, peer review, and reevaluation periodically on everything that comes through like this, we should implement that kind of a approach. That way, if we miss something, we can fix it, and it doesn't have to go on until these things come out, every 2 or 3 years, we can deal with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Do I have further public comment?
Hi, I'm Lynette Lucas, and I just wanted, you kind of brought that out, Mayor, that we need to pay attention to the 247, is it, additions? Is that what you said? Or there was there was a lot more additions than there were the other. And so I want to make sure that we're not adding any environmental problems to homeowners, any more expenses than necessary, and more regulation that is not needed. So I just want that considered. Thank you. And that is a lot to go through, and I thank you all for all your work, because it is a lot of work on that committee. And I don't remember the name of who and all did that, but thank you.
We want less regulation.
Yes.
Where we can have it, and I think
Less
that's an important. And I
regulation and-
believe the Home Builders Association and the group of people on the committee were very instrumental in making sure that the changes as presented were not burdensome to the point that it would be costly. So I appreciate that. Further public comment? With no further public comment, then we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion
Aye.
passes 7-0. Thank you, Al.
Thanks, Al.
We are
Excellent
going to
work.
take a 10-minute break, and then we will come back and we will discuss item E before we discuss item D. Okay? 5 a.m., and we will start by considering regular agenda, item E. Consider authorizing the San Angelo Fire Department to accept and execute the staffing for adequate fire and emergency response SAFER grant for $1,096,192 for 8 additional firefighters. This is a 3-year grant that the city will pay 25% of the salaries in year 1, 25% year 2, 65% in year 3, and the full amount of salaries and benefits starting the 4th year. Cost at the end of the 4th year will be $592,536. Todd, you're on.
Morning, Mayor, Council, City Manager. I appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you today about this. Mayor, if it's okay, I'd like to just kind of recap what got us here, if that's all right. I know you all know, but for the citizens here. Back in April 17th, I came and brought the possibility of applying for a SAFER grant to council to hire 8 additional firefighters. The council approved that opportunity, and so I wrote the grant. And I told you, first of all, I want to apologize because I told you the grant would start in July is when we would know. Well, the first grant was given July the 20th by the federal government, and they gave 2 of them. We didn't receive our grant until September the 7th. So I apologize. I told y'all that we would be getting it sooner, but can't really do what the federal government's going to do is what they're going to do. So I know that kind of put you in a bind because you had already planned on your budget and stuff, but it wasn't anything that we had control over. It was 100% the federal government. So we received notification on September the 7th that we had the grant. And so what's the grant actually for? The grant's for 8 firefighters. So I've had a lot of citizens. This has been a long council meeting, so I've had a lot pull me out and ask me, what's this about? So I want to just explain it real briefly. We're asking for 8 new firefighters, and it's 100% safety issue, safety driven. It is not. I had one citizen ask, aren't you just really, or are you padding your numbers? Absolutely not. This is 100% safety of the men and women of the San Angelo Fire Department. So what we're asking for, we want to put one more person on our ladder truck, which is a $1 million apparatus. That ladder truck right now is being used as a pumper truck, a fire truck, just like all the rest of the trucks in the city. It's a $1 million piece of equipment that is strictly to be used as a ladder company. Why is that important? We have over 121 3-story and above buildings in the city of San Angelo. Some of those buildings have elderly folks. They're residential elderly living facilities. I need 4 personnel to be able to run that apparatus as a ladder company, not a fire truck, a ladder company. I do want to correct a couple of things that I did talk to a couple of councilmen about. I told you it was a 300-gallon truck. That actually has 400 gallons in it. And so instead of a 2-minute firefighting, they can fight fire for 3 minutes. So it still doesn't matter. That truck was not made to fight fire. That truck was to be used as a ladder truck. So why is this such a passion, and why do we have to have 4 people on this truck? This document right here is from the Ferrara, which makes that fire truck. On every single page that's highlighted in blue right here of this operation manual is a warning. And I want to read you what the last page warning says. It's safety warning in big, bold letters. The qualified person shall never allow any part of the aerial to be occupied without a qualified person at the main aerial control station. The qualified person shall be at this main control station every second of aerial operations. So what that means is if we put our ladder truck up and we are spraying water like we did at the warehouse fire downtown about a month or two ago, and we stopped that fire by the brave actions of some of the men sitting behind me here. But if we put that ladder truck up and we're spraying water, that means we have to have one person at the pump panel monitoring all of the water pumps and gauges. We have to have one person up on top of the fire truck monitoring the aerial operation stuff on the control panel. Then you have to have 2 firefighters in the basket. That is a minimum of 4 firefighters. We have 3. That particular day, we had 2 firefighters up, and we had our driver, which this is what they do. Every single fire, we have to use this apparatus. He's running back from the pump panel to the control panel on the ladder, back and forth. And it's not like you can just run from me to Rick over there. You have to crawl up a ladder to get to that panel, then you have to crawl back down that ladder to get to the control panel. We got a firefighter hurt, and his wife's here. I don't know if she plans on saying, but he went down inside that bucket, and that driver was over at the pump panel. That's why we have to have that person at that control panel, because if those guys get in trouble, they can't get down. That control person has to get them down. The second thing I'm asking for is the battalion chief driver or aide. Why do we need this? First of all, if you've ever driven in San Angelo, you know that everybody runs red lights, and it gets pretty crazy out there. That's with you driving normal, watching, and being alert. You have some close calls. I'd venture to say everybody in this place has had a close call in San Angelo. Can you picture a battalion chief driving down the road, lights and siren, code 3, with 6 other apparatuses responding to a structure fire, with them talking on the radio, telling him what they've got, what they see, and him trying just to remember who's responding. When I used to be an acting battalion chief, I'd have to write them down because I couldn't remember who dispatched because there's so many different trucks going. So the first one gets there, he's listening, he's trying to figure out what's going on, and he's still driving in our traffic, trying to find the address. So he gets on scene. Once he gets on scene, the first truck's usually already there and they're fighting fire. So he backs off, he looks, he's engaged. We have a telemetry system in the back of our bat wagon that's been there for a year. This monitors all the accountability of every man. It actually tells the men or women's name that's in that burning building, and it tells us how much air's in there. That is a safety feature to keep these folks alive. For 1 year, we've had that in the back of the bat truck, and we hadn't used it yet because I don't have the personnel. So whenever people say this is to pad our manpower, no. This is a safety issue, and I've been asked, why has this never been brought forward? I hadn't been assistant chief but 2 years. This was one of my biggest concerns, is the safety of my personnel. So I knew how tough the budget was. I knew, and I do take it very, very serious, where we're going to get the money to pay for this. I don't take any of this lightly. That's why when we had the opportunity to go get $1 million to help us do this, that's what I went and did. So with that being said, I'll entertain any questions from you or public or whoever.
So we bought a ladder truck, when?
Chief, when's that ladder truck? 2011.
So we bought the ladder truck in 2011, and we haven't had the personnel to staff it since 2011?
No, ma'am.
Let's get some clarification, Chief. It's been utilized, but
Yes.
not in the way that it was bought for. Is that
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yes, sir. It's been
utilized more as a pumper truck
Yes, sir.
than it is a ladder truck.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And if we do have extra personnel on duty that day, Mayor, we do put that 4th person over there. but there is nobody guaranteed to be on that. And very
We
seldom.
haven't always just had 3 people on that truck. We have been able to shift some people at some point to do that.
Very few times in the year, but yes, ma'am.
All right, so when we bought the ladder truck, we knew we didn't have the staffing for it?
I can't answer that. I wasn't part of the administration at that time. We have to have a ladder truck in the city to
Well, I'm
protect
sure we
it.
do, yeah.
And
That's not the
so,
question.
You know, I'm sure that it's been asked. I know that Chief Dunn has asked to man, but because of budget constraints, we hadn't been able to get those extra personnel. It's just with the availability of the SAFER grant, we were able to bring some money to the table this time and hopefully get that moved forward that we've never had that opportunity to before.
So on the battalion, go ahead, Billy, and I'll ask mine in a minute.
Okay, I keep cutting you off,
It's
and I
okay.
apologize,
Thank you.
Mayor. I don't think I really have a question, but I have a comment. First of all, Chief Sanford, I want to say thank you for taking the time to show me, because I don't think I could have appreciated what you were asking here if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. And, you know, the safety of all of our citizens, I believe, is important, but especially the men and women that I see sitting out here today is really important. And what you showed me yesterday showed me how critical it is when you have somebody operating that ladder truck as a ladder truck, how critical it is to have that person manning the pumps and that person manning the gauges. Because I watched a young man, I don't know if he's here now, but yesterday when it was being demonstrated to me, I watched him have to run up that ladder, check what he needed to check there, then run back down and check his gauges. And I kept thinking, I hope he doesn't slip on that ladder. You know, it wasn't a very far fall, but I kept thinking that, you know, he was going up and down and manning it. So I saw how critical that was. The other thing that I saw, the critical need in that, what do you call it, Batmobile?
Well, some people may call it that, the Batwagon, yes, ma'am.
The Batwagon is,
you just had 4 bat chiefs got really big heads out here now. You just called them Batman.
But the criticality of watching the telemetry
Yes, ma'am.
system to know when you have somebody in a burning building, how much oxygen they have, and them being able to communicate back and forth and tell you to get out now and things like that. And I don't think, you know, I would have appreciated that if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. So as, you know, you've, you know, further explained today, and I think when the SAFER grant first came up, I think we appreciated, you know, go get the grant, see if it will work for us. I don't think yet today we know where we'll get the money in 3 or 4 years, but I can say without any question that I am in favor of us supporting this. And if I have to do fundraisers and bake sales and stuff to try to put some money, I'm willing to do that because I support this 100%. I just want our first responders out there to have the best safety measures that they can have, because, you know, when they're fighting fires and they're going to citizens' homes, we have to be as concerned about their safety as we are about the people they're trying to rescue. So I just appreciate it. I appreciate y'all's service. Thank you so much. And I just think we need to give you the safety apparatus that you need. Thank you, ma'am.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Billy. Lane, you wanted to
Did
comment?
you have your comment first?
No, go ahead. I'm okay.
Okay, Billy put me down for 3 batches of brownies. Chief Sanford, thank you for the phone call that we had. We've known that this has been an issue for multiple years. When we were going through budget and we saw the $150,000 match, which dwindled down a little bit, you know, we were kind of uncertain exactly how that was going to play out, especially for the coming up years for salaries. But for what y'all did to go and find the money within y'all's budget to help pay for this and to go along, first of all, to get this over $1 million for this. I'm with Billy 100%. This is a safety issue. We've needed it. These guys have needed it. Guys and ladies have needed it. So I don't know if you made a motion yet, Billy, but
We're not ready for a motion yet.
Okay.
So do I have, yes, Harry?
Thank you, sir.
Chief, I appreciate the opportunity for your staff out there to show me what was going on. What I told you on Friday was I believe in safety. Safety is number one, and I think we're going to continue to do that. I think the city finance and Daniel and the assistant city managers are going to be challenged in year 3 and 4. I know you've got this one handled with some savings that you're going to be looking at year 1. But I will have to say this. We've got to do what's right for the city of San Angelo, what's right for your firefighters, and we've got to take care of our citizens. And the best way to do that is start with the first responders. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Tommy?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good too. Thanks.
Lucy?
Chief, thanks.
Yes.
Chief Sanford, I didn't get to go see all this, but I was explained about the whole grant, and I want to tell you that I appreciate the fact that you did apply for it, that you went through that whole ordeal of doing that, and it is so good to see the fire department out there today. It's really neat, and I thank you guys, and I'm glad that you're here because we're allowed to finally come out and tell you thank you so much for everything you do and how you take care of our city. Appreciate you guys.
Mayor, if I may,
Yes.
Those are why we do what we do, because they're willing to lay down for the 100,000 people that's in this city. I think I've been here 27 and a half years. I've never seen this many firefighters show up at anything like this. I think that speaks for itself of how important this is. This is not just something that we thought up overnight and thought, well, that'd be a great thing to do. I think this proves how important this really is, and I appreciate every kind word and everything you've said, because it is about the safety of these men and women behind me.
Does it include 8 additional chairs if they ever come out this amount for our audience? I'm kidding.
They left him up front, didn't you notice?
With that said, I think you feel pretty confident that there's a lot of support from the individuals sitting up here and the citizens sitting up here who do believe that one of their key responsibilities is for the safety of the citizens, but also for the safety of those men and women who put their lives out there on the line for the citizens. So we thank you, and I also want to make sure that no one believes that the city council or I was short-sighted when we recommended the things that we recommended during the budget session. We were pretty much told on a regular basis that we didn't think we were going to get this grant. So the idea that we would budget for something we didn't think we were going to get didn't make sense. It did not mean that we didn't believe and did not support the firefighters, the men and women that are out there. So I don't want anyone to believe that the vote that was made, the conversation that was had was not against the firemen and firewomen and all the staff. We support our first responders. We support what they do to add safety and security to our citizens. So with that, do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Could we clarify that motion to say that it's contingent on the budget amendment, item 7E, passing as well? Because this will be an amendment to that fiscal year 19 budget.
I didn't have the opportunity. She told me I had to tell y'all that. So
Well, it didn't come out, so we didn't know that was part of it.
It's contingent on this because that's amendment to the budget, and it's going to come in as the entire grant, and it's going to come in to y'all as $148,000 from us. But like Lane said, we have that taken care in-house. But because of the way the grant's written, they have to do this budget amendment.
Okay, so with that said, the motion is to approve the grant with the amendment to the budget to include the $148,000, et cetera, pennies and dollars that I don't have exact. And with that, that would then be the new motion and the second on that motion, and then it's open for public comment. Seemingly, there is no public comment, so with that, we'll take a vote. All in favor of passing E, as well as the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
Mayor, if I may say one thing, thank you, first of all, very much thank you to council. I know this puts a burden on the city, and I promise it was not intentional. It was a need. thank you to my personnel. And there's one special, and this is way out of line, I'm sure, and I'll probably get in trouble, but I don't care. There's one special lady that taught me how to be passionate about taking care of people. And she's 80 years old today, and she's home watching, so happy birthday, Mom.
That's great.
Come on.
I would ask the council to sing happy birthday, but I've never found middle C, so I'm not going to embarrass myself on that issue. All right. Thank you all, and thanks for hanging out with this council meeting. I know you had better things to do, but I think it was worth it. Thank you for your support and all that you do.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to go back to item D, which is consider awarding RFB PK-03-18 renovation and expansion of Ruffini parking lot to Simcoe Structural Incorporated of San Angelo, Texas, in the amount of $279,655 budgeted for purchase in fiscal year 19, and authorizing the city manager to execute any related documents. Al, you're on.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, Al Torres, construction manager. First of all, I promise not to use purple primer in this presentation.
I'm going to start wearing purple eyeshadow and see what you think.
Too late.
This is a project, as you know, that was bid back in July. We've been going back and forth on the funding on this project. You discussed it at the last council meeting, and the suggestion at the last council meeting was that you put $200,000 into this budget as part of the budget amendment. Again, this is tied to the budget amendment, which is the next item on the agenda. But this gives you a chance to look at the project again, or talk about the project if you need to. But it is tied to those funds. So the slide that I have is the bid amount is $279,655. We had $67,200 in our 2018 budget. We talked last week about giving us $200,000 out of the budget amendment, and that would still leave us $12,455 short. The comment was that we could probably find that somewhere. Thanks to Tina and her staff, they did manage to find savings in our 2018 budget to plug that in, so that gives us what we need. And then just a quick slide to kind of show you what we're getting. I don't know I think hopefully everybody's familiar with the project, but basically this is the Ruffini Chapel that's being constructed now, and this is the senior center that's existing. And even though this parking lot is being built in conjunction with the Ruffini project, it primarily is going to serve the senior center. And so that's the design is not only to beautify the area, to keep it with themes of Old Town that's being done by the Conservancy, but it's also to make it a safer pedestrian route for the senior centers. We're creating a pedestrian way across here, and it'll make it safer for them to go through the parking lot back and forth from the senior center and to the other things in that area. So with that, if you have any questions,
I do. If you'll go back to the first slide, there's just a question for clarification, because as you know, I supported doing this. My question is, if we didn't know where the money was going to come from, how did we go out and get bid amounts when we didn't? I mean, I'm confused about the process here.
It was a council-driven item that was given to staff way back as far as removing this building, creating a parking lot. So we did not have, the only way we can get a price is if we go ahead and do bids. So we got the authorization to move forward with the tear down of the building, tear that off. Council authorized the Old Town to go ahead and put in the building, and so we drew up a design and went out to get a bid. We can reject the bids, but we had to get a dollar amount to bring to you, and then hopefully figure out a way to do that. We had other options where if we needed to go down and just simply pave the parking lot as is, we could do that within the $67,000. It's not going to be pretty, but it would function. So that's the reasoning for us to bring you options as to how to do it. If we're going to,
would not have addressed the ADA issues.
Right, right. One thing I would note on Al's thing, one thing we've been looking at as far as this project goes, the Parks Department currently maintains all of the Old Town grounds in that area. They also maintain the area around the senior center as it is now with the different beds. So they would take that responsibility on in this area. One thing that may change on this plan is those islands in the center. We'll look at those. We may actually eliminate those to reduce, one, some of the landscaped areas, but two, mainly because it could increase a few parking places in there, and we think the parking places are while the aesthetics are important, it's really important that we get as many parking places there as possible.
So did we go out with an RFQ to get a bid? Or how did we, did we ask one person to do it, or did we do the
ma'am,
normal process?
No, ma'am, we went through the bid process, and we had 2 bidders, and the low bid is the one that we're proposing.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? With that, I will entertain a motion.
Same as the last item, this will be contingent on the budget amendment.
Which is the next discussion, so with that, there's a motion, a second. Any public comment? With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Okay, the next item is item F. Consider ratifying COSA DC's approval of a resolution authorizing the use of sales and use tax funds in an amount not to exceed $225,000 to the San Angelo Chamber of Commerce for promotional and business recruitment services, a project authorized under what?
You're on the wrong one somehow or other.
I think that was consent.
Sorry, I pulled up the wrong page, so I need to go to item, sorry.
Item F.
It's not,
It's okay.
item F, just not on consent agenda. Sorry. That's what happens when you unstaple. Item F, first public hearing and introduction of an ordinance amending the budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2018 and ending September 30th, 2019 for capital items, grants, and reimbursed expenses. Tina?
Good morning, Mayor, Council, Mr. Valenzuela. I have for you today a budget amendment that includes a number of items. This first slide shows the projects that you approved at your last meeting, which used a bulk of the excess sales tax surplus money from fiscal year 2018. So you have your animal shelter improvements at $200,000, the traffic signal battery backup at $200,000, Parks tree irrigation at just over $120,000, the Station 618 parking lot that we just discussed with the amounts of $200,000 plus the $12,455. Riverbank stabilization at $60,000 and Fort Concho improvements at $161,170.
Don't we need to add to that then the SAFER grant? Isn't that what we just said?
That's on another slide coming up. Yes, ma'am. But these will all be coming out of last year's
Excess sales tax
Yes.
revenue. Do I have any questions from anyone? Do I have a motion to approve?
A
I
few
thought
more
you said-
amendments. I'm sorry, Mayor. I have 4 slides in all. 4 separate amendments. So this one is to approve the additional revenue of $146,000 for the Texas Parks and Wildlife Grant with the local match of $48,000 and the original local match of $117,750. There is already an amount budgeted in Fund 103 for this project of $353,750, I believe. And so this additional revenue will be on top of that as well as the expense.
Can we go back through what this is?
One out at the lake for the
Middle Concho
Middle Concho
boat
for the
ramp.
boat
Bathrooms
ramp, the
and-
bathrooms
yes.
the site out there.
Yeah, just to make sure everybody
Putting
knows
in
what
the-
we're talking
taking out
about.
the septic tanks, putting in the sewer system.
Right.
This next amendment is to budget for the uncompensated care cost that we receive from the state. It's basically a reimbursement for unpaid Medicaid and insurance for ambulance services. And so we're using that amount to pay for the peak hours ambulance service for the fiscal year 19, and then the contract services that are associated with obtaining this reimbursement, as well as the remainder we are planning to use for a new ambulance.
I thought we already budgeted for the new ambulance last year.
We budget for a new ambulance, I believe, every year in Fund 501, and I think this would be an additional ambulance.
I didn't realize that hasn't come up as a conversation before.
Chief, did you want to?
Because with that, then you have additional staff to cover the ambulance, right?
What this is we budget to refurbish ambulances every 7 years, but because like what we talked about the other day, unfunded government mandates, we have had to change the way we do business. We're not able to just refurbish an ambulance anymore. We have to buy a brand new ambulance. And what that entails is it has to be bigger because we have to secure every single thing in our ambulance, including our cot. And so that's a new law that we're having to meet. And so this is budgeted every year for the refurbishation, but since we can't do that anymore because of the law, we're asking for this money to go to a new ambulance instead of the refurbishation of the additional ambulance. This will not be a new ambulance, it's manned. It will just replace a first out ambulance that we have right now.
Okay, my memory might be short, but I know this. Today is October 2nd of the new budget year, and we've spent several months and weeks talking about budgets, and I understand how this numbers work, so I'm not against this. Do not get me wrong. I'm just concerned. We just passed a budget. This is October the 2nd. We spent weeks and months talking about the budgets, and then all of a sudden, here we are with new things. It's just a little confusing. Not.
This is a one-time funding source, and we do not know the amount that we'll receive until the very later part of the fiscal year. And so we did mention the peak hours ambulance when we were going through our budget discussions, as well as we always have to pay the consultant that gets this reimbursement for us. But then with the additional funding, I think this was just a suggestion from Chief Dunn that something that we could attack since we had that additional
And I'm
funding
not
source.
against it. I just think we need to be a lot more thorough in our budget presentations instead of on October 2nd, second day of the year, it coming up as a conversation. Does not mean I'm against it, doesn't mean I don't support it. I just find it interesting on day 2, we're already changing budgets. That's all.
Mayor, I do want to point out that what unfunded mandates do for us, the new ambulances at $257,000. Previous ambulances, Chief, they were at $150,000 is what we purchased them. So that unfunded mandate put us over $100,000 now just to replace each ambulance going forward.
That's probably true. I just want to know when we found that out because, again, second day of the new budget season, and here we are making adjustments, and I'm perfectly supportive of this. I just think it ought to be done before day 2 of the new year, new budget. That's all.
Understood, Mayor. Okay, this amendment is for the fire exhaust grant, where we have a local match of $23,181 to leverage the grant revenue of $231,810. And of course, the total expense will go towards the fire exhaust projects in each of the fire stations. And finally, we have the budget for the SAFER grant, the revenue of $444,000 with a local match of $148,000. And all of the expense for that will, of course, go to fire salaries.
Any others? Okay. With that, do we have a motion to, or questions before I ask for a motion? Do I have any questions?
Mayor, I
Any
make
further
a motion
comments?
that we accept the amendments to the budget.
Second.
Any public comment? With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. At this point in time, we will move into closed session. The executive session under provision of Government Code Title V, Open Government, Ethics, Subtitle A, Open Government, Chapter 551, Open Meetings, Subchapter D, exceptions to requirement that meetings be open under the following sections. A, Section 551.072, deliberation regarding real property. A governmental body may conduct a closed meeting to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if deliberation in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governmental body in negotiations with a third person. And B, Section 551.071, to consult with attorney when the governmental body seeks the advice of its attorney on a matter in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the Texas disciplinarian rules of professional conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with this chapter regarding the solid waste contract. And item C, Section 551.0741, to deliberate the annual evaluation of the city manager. We will be 1 hour. There are no announcements concerning anything discussed in our closed session, so we will move on to item B, which is to consider approving various board nominations. One is the Development Corporation for Max Puelo, SMD 3, to an unexpired term ending February 2019, and then a Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, John Mark Hogue for SMD 5, to an unexpired term ending December 2019. Do I have any?
Move approval.
Second. Any public comment? With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With none opposed, items pass. Item C, announcements and considerations of future agenda items. Do we have any?
I actually have one.
Okay, Brian?
We've been asked to, normally we bring this the second meeting of October. We've been asked to talk about the scheduling around November and December to make sure planning has enough time to plan for it. So the second meeting in November is really the one we just need to talk about today, and then we can bring back our normal discussion next week for the rest of it, or next meeting. So the second meeting is scheduled for the 20th of November, which is 2 days before Thanksgiving. So we thought that might be an issue, so we wanted to bring it before you and see if it was, see if you wanted to move it to one meeting in November. We've done that in the past, kind of in between the two.
I'll be here.
I'll be here.
Just one less day in the work week
Yeah.
for those of us that have a job.
I don't know.
So we'll leave it as it is for now.
I won't be here.
Oh, you won't?
So can we have one meeting? Can we consider that, having one?
Then we're going to need to consider whether, because if we do only one in November and only one in December, we
December
need to be concerned.
looks a little bit better because it's the 4th and the 18th, so it's still a full week out. I think we might can have both meetings in December.
Okay, so you're talking about Tuesday and then it being Thursday. Yes, I will be here.
You will be here.
So are we talking about, if we did November, we talking about doing it the 6th, if we just had one meeting and then the?
No, I would recommend that you do it on the 13th.
13th.
That way, at least you could catch the most if you're going to combine it into one meeting. But if there's enough for a quorum to have two meetings, then that would be good. The only issue is if anything comes up last minute and you have to cancel that meeting because of quorum, it's going to create a burden of costs on the planning department to have to send out new notices for the stuff that they're already dealing with. And so that's the reason they've asked for us to bring this portion of it one meeting early.
I think we've satisfied that we will have enough people here to ensure a quorum.
So we'll do the 6th and the 20th, or just the 6th?
And the 20th.
And the 20th.
Both meetings.
Okay,
Ready?
okay.
With that, are there any other public announcements or consideration? If not, then I will ask for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
It passes.